Granby Town Hall, County Route 8, Town of Granby, New York, for the purpose of considering an application for a special use permit for the excavation of sand and gravel from property located on County Route 8 and County Route 85. Said premises being owned by Robert B. Ferguson, and an application being submitted by Richard B. Ferguson. And as most of you present are aware, that meeting was adjourned again until this evening. Major reason for that was for the benefit of Mr. Eggleston's consultant to be able to be here and speak. The usual formality is to have the applicant speak first. Is there any new news that you would like to bring up?
Mr. Wilcox, my name is Rosemary Stack, as I introduced myself before the meeting. I'd just like to put on the record for this evening, I am special mining counsel for the Fergusons.
We can't hear.
I am special mining counsel for the Fergusons for this evening. We understand that Mr. Eggleston is going to make a presentation tonight. We would like the opportunity following his presentation to respond to the board. I think the board is aware of our application. If you'd like me to, it's my understanding, I've come into this late, but it's my understanding there was one public hearing back in December and that a presentation was made. You have the applications before you. And if you would like us to go through that again, we'd be more than happy to, but otherwise we'll reserve to the end of the meeting. The only other things that I would add preliminarily is that I think the board is aware from General Counsel for Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Pelkey, that we have noted our reservation of rights on the record as far as the proceedings, to the extent that they are this board is looking for a special use permit. I've discussed with your counsel the town's position, and we are going forward since we're in this process and it's at a public hearing stage, but we're just going to reserve our rights on the record with respect to the fact that the DEC has jurisdiction to regulate mining operations. That the state law has preempted regulations, although that they have left, I think it's 4 specific provisions under the Mine Land Reclamation Law of items that this board can regulate through a special use permit provision. So with that reservation of rights on the record, we would defer to listening to what Mr. Eggleston has to say. It's my understanding he's going to be limited to discussing the aspects of the special use permit provisions under the zoning law, the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the town, and that will not proceed into the environmental issues, which have already been reviewed and determined under the State Environmental Quality Review Act by the Department of Environmental Conservation, who assume lead agency with notice and consent of the town to review the environmental impacts of this operation. And the fact that that review, which was based on a long-form environmental assessment form, which was on notice to the town, and Mr. Eggleston was aware of the application. In fact, the permit or the public comment period was reopened for his clients and his sake, so that he could make comments on that application. And the Department of Environmental Conservation, following a very thorough review of all their experts and their divisions, found there is not going to be a significant negative impact from this operation. So to the extent, I would just ask the board to be aware of that, so that we keep this public hearing limited to the issues that are before it, being those in front of your, those governed by your zoning ordinance, and not the environmental issues that have already been determined and looked at. The State Environmental Quality Review Act provides that in actions such as this, where there has been coordinated review with the other involved agencies, that there's only one environmental review to be conducted, and that has been conducted. Mr. Eggleston and his clients have been given the opportunity and even been extended the opportunity of opening the public comment period to comment on the application. DEC has taken into consideration their comment in their position on the environmental issues and determined that there is not going to be a significant negative impact from this operation. So with that understanding with the board, I'll defer to our presentation or response until after Mr. Eggleston.
Okay, very good. Dennis?
Is this?
I've asked the principals here tonight to enunciate their particular concerns before my presentation, so I call upon this gentleman to proceed with that.
Have your name and address.
Dennis Lyons, RD1, Box 251, Fulton, New York. I didn't catch your last name, I'm sorry. Stack. Okay, do you have that DEC permit with you?
Yes,
Signed?
we have the DEC permit.
Is it approved?
Yes, it is.
And did it get?
Did you get it today?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can we see anything of this, or is this something that we, because I talked to him this afternoon at 11 o'clock, or this morning at 11 o'clock, and I didn't hear anything that was approved. You do have it?
It has been approved. Maybe one of the reasons you did not hear that it was approved is that, is his name Kevin Bliss?
Yes.
Kevin Bliss,
Wasn't in
because of the
today.
weather, was not able to make it in today.
Okay.
But we were advised last week that it had been approved and would be.
I think that's contrary.
I talked to Kevin
It's
yesterday.
contrary to the DEC.
I need one person at a time, please.
Okay, that's contrary to DEC, because we have talked to DEC every day this week. And we have talked to Kevin Bliss, Joe Masquich, Bill Gallagher,
The attorney.
and none of it has been signed as date. Okay? But I
I
do-
would be happy. I have, unfortunately, because of the weather, picked up the permit on our way here and do not have extra copies. I'll be happy to give it to the board for their review and consideration. But what I would ask is just at the end of the evening to be able to receive it back so we can make copies, and we'll certainly have copies delivered to the board.
So you have it in your hand right
Yes.
now?
Yes.
But you said Kevin Bliss wasn't in today.
His supervisor, Bob Torba, actually handed the permit
Okay.
to us.
Okay. Well, I'd like to state something on this mining permit application then. I was just looking through these, and it's pretty interesting. And the mine permit application, number 21, the number on it, if you want to read along with me. I hereby affirm on the penalty of perjury that information provided in this form is to the best of my knowledge and belief. False statements may be hereby punishable as a Class A misdemeanor pursuant Section 210.45 of the Penal Law. I have a signature by Robert B. Ferguson, Vice President, on 8/2/93. And I also have another one that says the same thing. Contrary to the permit, we have this other up here in the mine reclamation minor project. It says in B, with a vertical depth of the top of the mine face of the floor exceed 20 feet. This one says yes. This one says no. This one, as you can see, has a whiteout in it. Can I show this to you, please?
Sure. Because I'm looking for...
I think there's a judicial fact here.
There may be
Right
some
there.
issue he's raising, but I don't see what relevance
Why-
it is to the board. If
Why
there's
isn't the
an issue-
signature changed? And why
If
isn't
there's
the...
an issue before DEC, he should bring that up to DEC,
We
not
have,
to this board.
that's why we're asking here. Shouldn't it be signed by and dated when there's a change to a permit? I asked the board. You're a judicial system. These are two different.
We're a town judicial system, though, not a DEC judicial system.
Right.
You're reviewing that permit.
But you're reviewing this permit, and this is what we're basing a lot of this on.
As part of the permit.
I think if anything, this should be dated with a signature changed.
Mr. Chairman, after you look at that, could we see the documents? Because I'm
Sure.
somewhat confused as to what...
Right here. See, this is the previous one, and then with a signature and dated, which is legal. Signature, dated, same date, different answers.
You got these from DEC's files?
Yes, they're in the town files here too. They're the same files.
Well, I can tell you that the plans that are set out in the narrative mine land use plan, which explain the operation, are correct.
What is the answer? Your Can you give me one?
I believe.
It's a major project because it's over 5 acres.
I think the question's irrelevant. I think that if the board has any questions with regard to the vertical slopes, we'll be happy to respond to those this evening.
Can you give me an answer
The
what
fact
it
is, this box on this application form is used to determine whether it's a minor or major project. And what that governs is the type of review that it's going to be, that it's going to undergo at the DEC level. They use it as an internal type of measure under their regulations to determine whether it's a minor or major project. They treat it by virtue of the fact that they treated this as a type 1 action, which has been listed on the negative declaration that they issued, and the coordination forms that they used, they treated it as a major project. So I think that any issue with respect to whether that was correct or not is irrelevant. They did treat it as a major project.
It didn't change the review of the application. The application
So you can have yes or no on it?
the application was reviewed as a major, and that did not change. It was continued to be reviewed as a major project. So it didn't change the ultimate review of the project in the eyes of the DEC.
Did I get the answer of whether it's yes or no?
It didn't change the review of the project in the eyes of the DEC. The project was a major from the start, and it remained a major.
But when it's a
So it
public
had-
hearing,
it had no
I am
impact.
asking if it is a yes or no. I'm asking, this is a public hearing, right? I'm not talking about the DEC at this point. This is perjury. Which one? Yeah, will the vertical depth from the top of the mine face to the floor exceed 20 feet?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Is this a question and answer period?
I thought this was a public hearing. We wanted to find out some information on this permit.
Could you explain, Henry, how we're supposed to conduct ourselves so it doesn't get out of hand, please?
Yes.
Thanks.
Sorry.
The application that we have in front of us has it checked as a yes. And I believe the original permit, the original application that we had in front of us, all we have ever seen is yes. To the best of my knowledge.
Planning board
I think
filed
maybe-
too, Henry, if you want to look at it, and it says no.
And it says
This is
no
where
in
we
there?
got these from.
I got them right here.
From the planning board
And there's
file?
no signature, the signature and date has never changed. I don't believe this is legal. I can't believe this could be legal in any court of law,
This
or
is
anywhere.
the old one, is what
Do we
he
have the old one here?
explained.
I can't explain where you got the one that says no.
It was the first permit submitted to this town.
Because there was 2 applications submitted.
This was supposed to have been an updated, corrected. The date has never changed.
First one submitted to DEC had the box checked, yes, and I think that answers your question.
We, There it is. Find it out.
No.
The first copy that we have answers it no. The second copy that we have answers it yes.
Correct.
Apparently, Mr. Wilcox, I was mistaken. Mr. Rob Snyder, who is the consultant, did indicate that in reviewing the application, DEC sat down with them and reviewed what they wanted to see as additional information. When the supplement was submitted, we did revise that form to indicate that it would be more than 20 feet on the height. The fact remains, though, that DEC since day one has treated this as a major project. So I really can't understand what the big to-do is about whether it was checked yes or no. I mean, the result was the same, and nobody is intentionally trying to pull any wool over anybody's eyes. The height of the faces are going to be in excess of 20 feet, which is normal in a mining operation. The other factor that maybe the board would feel some comfort level with respect, they're not really even making an issue of the height of the faces, but to the extent that that may raise an issue in your minds, the federal government, through MSHA, which is the Mine Safety and Health Act, do regulate the height of the faces, and they have the jurisdiction over that to make sure that the faces are at a safe level.
My recollection is that, and I obviously can't turn to it immediately, but my recollection is that in the description, in the application, it talks about depth.
Yes, it does.
You know this in and out, Dennis. Can you
Yeah.
We do.
tell me where it is? I mean, you've got it
Yeah.
memorized.
Well, I think
Just a minute. Okay, go ahead.
Basically, if I could explain the procedure, the method under which this is going to be mined. The site is a bowl-shaped site, and it consists of a series of four-way dip features and a northeast-southwest trending ridge. What we're going to do basically is we're going to plane off the top of the four-way dip
Can't
features,
hear.
and
Spin so they can.
we're going to be, as a last phase, phase 4, we're going to be getting into mining of the ridge. The ultimate mine face height, this number right here, only relates to whether the DEC considers this project a minor or a major. This project always was a major, and it always will be a major in the eyes of the DEC. What we're going to do is, the mining method is basically going to involve, on the ridge area where the potential mine face height is the maximum, is pushing material down slope. So the mining sequence will include pushing material downslope, so essentially we'll be grading that surface to its angle of repose as we're mining. So in fact, we won't be creating a 37-foot high mine face or even a 20-foot high mine face. We're going to be creating slope as we mine. We'll be pushing material down slope. So basically that box only relates to whether this particular project is a minor or a major. It does not really have any
I
relevance
understand.
as to how this site is mined, because we've indicated to the DEC how we're going to mine it.
That's correct. And in your maps, you've mentioned the depth that you're going to be going to, which is
Correct.
greater than the 20 feet, so.
Correct.
All right.
Right.
That-
So
that-
it was
Dennis,
shown- it was
I
shown on-
agree with what you're saying,
Mhm.
but that's not an issue in front of this board. That is a DEC issue.
This was submitted to us as part of the application.
Yes.
So what does it mean? Nothing?
That,
The mine life
which
is-
way that goes does not mean anything to us, no.
Okay.
Because inside of the application, in the map section, it shows that it's going before, or deeper than a vertical depth of 20 feet
This is from the mine floor, 20 feet deep.
to the,
What's considered the floor then?
well, they're saying that it's going to be more than 20 feet deep from the
From floor level.
slopes of
From
the
where
surrounding area.
where it's existing now.
Correct, according to the maps.
Okay.
So my feeling is that you're absolutely right, but it's a moot point because it's already been drawn as being greater than 20 feet. Moot point with us, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah, my name is Fred White. I live at RD1 Barton's 250. And I'm opposed to this mine, and I've said that the last several times that we were here. And I want to describe my first meeting with Rick Ferguson, which occurred around August of '93. And I'm going to do that for a reason. We discussed what his plans were, I offered him a beer, and we discussed what his plans were for the property. And he introduced himself, and in so many words, said to me that he intended on only mowing the meadow and using what he mowed for his in-laws' livestock and nothing else. The date on the application to the DEC, as you just look at in front of you, is August the 2nd, about the same time that he talked to me. The reason I bring this up is because we've heard over and over that Rick Ferguson or Ferguson Beach Limited will cooperate and make any changes necessary to stay in good with the town or be a good neighbor. Should we really believe this from a man who says one thing and does another? For this reason, I would expect nothing be left for him to do but follow the laws exactly starting with completing the application process correctly, which he failed to do the last time. It seems like he talks a good talk, but the application's still not correct. Here's another example right here I didn't even think about. The map that he submitted is not required by the zoning laws. It's supposed to have 2-foot intervals out to 200 feet beyond that. All it shows is 2-foot intervals, if you would. Put that over, and that's a copy of the map that you guys submitted. It shows them inside the actual area. That's upside down. 90 degrees more. 90 degrees more. There you go. It shows the 2-foot intervals, and that extends out a little bit, and that's all fine. Wherever they got that data, it's signed and by and stamped by a professional engineer. So I'm sure that part's accurate as far as what it should be. But it doesn't contain the information 200 feet beyond the property line. And it says it right in our page 23 of the zoning laws. One, and I thought this was going to be fixed the last time we were here. I thought you told them that. Fix it. Here's another chance. Go out and fix it. Several hills, and I just took a little cursory walk alongside that property since my house is pretty close, and I found 3 hills, and I labeled them in green there that aren't even shown on that. They're at least this tall. They're at least this tall, and that's 2-foot intervals. That's a good 6 feet.
We have pictures of that too, to verify.
One of those is full of garbage. Why are these hills not on the map? Is there something in that garbage pile you don't want anybody to see? I don't know. When you apply for any permit, you're required to complete it accurately. You can't get permission to drive a car when you complete, unless you complete the application. What gives? Why can't Ferguson Beach Limited complete an application correctly? How many chances does anyone get to do it right? As Mr. Pelkey said, he would do it back in December. I'm against this mine.
Okay. Yes.
My name is Tim Maxim. I'm also, excuse me, I live
Would I get an answer first? Why those hills aren't on the map?
Is this a question and answer session, or do you want us to respond at the public hearing?
You can respond.
That's what I want to know, why it's not on there.
With respect to Mr. White's comment, I think it should be taken into account by the board that we are cooperating, overly so. We've looked at the laws. I've been involved in mining applications for the past 7 years. The local laws that we're dealing with are, in my opinion, preempted by the Mineland Reclamation Law. Mineland Reclamation Law in 1991 was amended to further restrict towns' abilities to regulate mining operations to the 4 very limited issues: access and ingress into the site from town roads. The type of review that we're undergoing before your board, with all due respect, is something that has been preempted. However, the Fergusons do live in the area. They want to be good neighbors, and they want to have a town that they can work with, that knows its operation and knows the limited nature of the operation, that they're going to do what is environmentally sound and appropriate with respect to their neighbors, and the use of their property is legal. Requiring mining plans and the details that we've submitted to the board. I've been involved in any number of cases across the state where those types of requirements have been held by the courts of the state have been preempted by state law. Be that as it may, we've gone to the trouble of showing to the regulation, to the very technical specifications of your regulations, in resubmitting an application which does show the contour levels to the extent that they're required by your ordinance. I think you can see by the resubmission, which does show that because of the nature of the mining activity and the contours, that really doesn't give the board as much of a good picture of what's happening out there, what exists today, what will exist, as the contours of the original plan, which conform with DEC's requirements, who have been regulating mining operations for almost 20 years now, who have the regulations which specify exactly what is to be depicted on the plans, how the contours should be depicted, what intervals, et cetera, and that's how they regulate mining operations and have successfully for over 20 years. Those are the plans we originally gave to this board for your review, and so that the town would understand our mining operation. It was brought up a technicality, my understanding, in December by Mr. Egelstein, that we didn't conform to the 2-foot intervals, and we went back and revised those maps, which show the contours to that. The zoning ordinance itself, if I may bring out that point, does not require that the contour levels extend beyond the property lines. What that section actually states, showing, must show all land within 200 feet thereof with exact locations of all buildings, streets, utilities, drainage, or other easements, water courses, lot lines, block and lot numbers, and names of landowners. We've done that.
Let's that out.
Such map shall also show the present topography at 2-foot contour intervals. We show the present topography of our property at 2-foot contour intervals. Also included in the application, if the board was interested in the topography of the surrounding site, is the USGS topo map, which does show the contours of this area. Essentially, I mean, if we were to use some common sense in this proceeding, the purpose of showing the contour levels is so that you can have a picture of how the site looks today and what will occur with the mining activity and what will it look like after. There really isn't any reason for contour levels at 2-foot intervals to extend beyond the property line, 200 feet on either side.
Okay.
If I might, except that if there was an oil spill or something because of this, the machine you're gonna use there, and my property was downhill of that, within 200 feet, it might go into my land.
We have,
Maybe. I would suggest that the reason they asked for the 200-foot or 2-foot contours out to 200 feet, as it clearly states, that one of the reasons to see the effect it's going to have on the surrounding land. Else, why would you ask for it? It'd be stupid to put that in there.
I think, Mr. White, that it's a bit of a gray area that the contours have to go out 200 feet. It specifically states that within 200 feet of the property or the area that is going to be mined, the exact locations of all buildings, streets, utilities, drainage or other easements, water courses, da-da-da-da-da.
And it says such map,
Yes?
that map that we just described,
Yeah?
shall also show the present topography at 2-foot intervals,
All right.
black and white.
But I believe that that's referring just to the,
Where does it even come
Land
close
that's
to implying that?
again, I think,
Well-
and I understand, Mr. Wilcox, that you're reading the ordinance the way that I would read it.
course.
It may be just another sense of, some common sense to bring into this when we're looking at the ordinance, and the requirement is, when you're talking about mapping something on 2-foot contour intervals, you're really talking about, in order to be accurate, to going on the property. And I don't really think that the intent of the framers of this ordinance was that we should be given the right to go on all property within 200 feet of our property line. And I would doubt that some of the people here tonight would even agree to allow us to do that.
Certainly would.
So we
Isn't
would,
it surveyed?
we would be able to map that. It's just, there's really no reason to map that information on the, in order for the mining operation, for the board to understand it.
okay.
It's a requirement. I mean, it's not
Henry,
their choice.
one more thing. You mentioned that you said today you wanted to show the contours. Well, I believe the wooded area that's marked up in here, that hasn't been wooded for 10 years. I don't know where it came wooded on the map, but it's not been wooded in 10 years. I mean, you want to look at it, we have a picture of it here. There's a little row of trees on one side, but the area where it's marked wooded has never been wooded. That was pulled out for topsoil 8 years ago, and the topsoil is still, some of it still remains. The trees were cut and it was made topsoil. In fact, I think you can verify it with a few of the residents here.
So on the 3 small mounds, how come they're not on the map? Was
You said
that
today.
really a good, accurate map? If it was, I assume it is, then why aren't those 3 areas on it? I got pictures of it right here. This is accurate?
Okay.
No answer?
No answer. Marked it as being an exception that you have towards the maps. Understand?
Thanks. Thank you.
Welcome. Your neighbor next to you?
My name is Tim Maxim. I live at RD5, Box 465, Oswego, that being the Bingham Road. My relation to this project is approximately 400 to 500 feet west, directly west of the affected area. I am also against this mine because of, I am here to represent the adults and particularly the children in the area that suffer from allergy and asthma-related problems, and there are several. Now, as you're all aware, the Bingham Road area is in a valley formed by the Ridge Road, County Route 85 to the west, and this project here to the east. We currently have a saturated condition.
Excuse me, Tim. Since we have that map right there, could you point to where you live?
That's past the 200 mark.
Right.
Oh, that's right. I'm
That's
sorry.
past the 200 mark.
I apologize.
But I am roughly 400 to 500 feet west of this project.
Right.
As I stated, we do live in a valley right there. The existing mining operations that are there have already created a saturated condition of dust and diesel fumes which settle in this valley. And on behalf of some of the children of the neighborhood, I have letters here from both parents and doctors, my son included, and I would like to read these. First of all, I have a letter here from Sharon Poinier. She lives at RR5, box 467, West 5th Street Road, just off of County Route 85. Town of Granby Town Board. Incidentally, these were presented to the Town Board back in December. Town Board, Town of Granby, Fulton, New York. Dear board members, please be advised that our son, Patrick Poinier, has had asthma since birth. He is severely allergic to dust and diesel fumes. At least 10 trucks per day run past our home on West 5th Street Road. For the health and safety of our son, as well as all the area residents, I suggest that this kind of activity cease, or at least these businesses be forced to comply with the laws regarding their activities. We have been told that what our neighbors do with their property is their business and that we should not infringe on their rights. But what about our rights? And this was signed by Sharon Poinier. The next letter is from Christine Bassett. She resides on County Route 85, Bingham Road area. I believe her box number is box 254.
Okay.
Again, Town Board, Town of Granby. Dear board members, our child Amanda, age 14, has been asthmatic since age 3. She is severely allergic to dust. Dump trucks with loads uncovered unceasingly spew dusty gravel in front of and around our home on County Route 85. For Amanda's health and the health of all area residents, I submit a plea that this destructive activity cease, or at the very least, that the businesses responsible be forced to comply with all area state and federal laws and regulations governing their activities. This was signed by Christine Bassett. The next letter is from my neighbor in regard to Michael Manwaring. He lives at RD5 box 464, Oswego, Bingham Road.
Okay.
And this letter was written on his behalf from Dr. Hasborn, his doctor. To whom it may concern, Michael Manwaring has been an asthmatic patient of ours since September of 1993. Since that time, he has been treated with inhalers due to his asthma. Dust and diesel fumes may aggravate his asthma. If any questions, you may call our office. And it was signed by Dr. Hasborn on 12/8/93. And now on behalf of my son, I have a letter from his doctor, Dr. Spay. He has asthma, he has allergies. He is currently receiving 2 shots a week for his allergies. To whom it may concern, Brandon Maxim has been an allergy patient of ours since 1990. Since that time, he has been tested twice for allergies, showing positive sensitivity for dust. Based on his test results, contact with dust may aggravate his allergies. And it was signed by Dr. Spay. And at the time, I had written a letter on his behalf to the town board. Dear board members, my son Brandon suffers from severe environmental allergies and asthma. He presently requires 2 allergy shots per week to maintain control. The present saturated mining conditions in my neighborhood are presenting a serious health challenge for him. The volume of airborne dust and diesel fumes from these operations were a likely contributor to his deteriorated health condition during the summer of 1993. Having lost the battle in late August, resulting in hospitalization for pneumonia, I am faced with a difficult challenge. Should the board consider any further operations in our already saturated neighborhood, we would be forced to move from the area. With real estate being nearly worthless in our neighborhood, abandonment would be the likely result. Having resided in this neighborhood for over 35 years, I have to wonder just how it is that our town is protecting our rights as citizens or neighbors. Granby is unique in that the number of families that remain in the town, generation after generation, is evident of the quality of life that the town represents. The preservation of this quality should be of utmost value to the town board members, and I would like to also add the zoning board. Careful consideration should be given to such invasive forces as mining when they threaten to destroy this quality. We ask that this consideration be applied on behalf of our son, our family, and our neighbors' families when you make the decision on the Ferguson Beach mining permit. And I've signed it. The point I'm trying to make is that there are already saturated conditions of dust and diesel fumes in the area. The state recognizes this as cumulative impact. It's something that needs to be addressed because allowing even more mining operations in an already saturated neighborhood is a detriment to these kids. It's a further compromise of their health. Now, I've gone out personally and I've got the morning paper at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning in the summertime, and you can still smell the dust and diesel fumes in the air from the day before. To the west now, as you probably know, we have the Meany Pit, the Northern Pit, and the Pritchard Pit. And it just, in the summertime when this gets going and the heat and everything, all these fumes come down and settle in the valley. And this project will be to the other side of me. And again, these dust and diesel fumes will be settling in. Now the Meany Pit is 600 feet from my backyard. As the crow flies, this will be 400 to 500 feet. When is enough enough? I mean, this is an issue that has to be addressed.
Okay.
And I will give you a copy of these. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Lon?
My name's Lon Hathaway, and I live at the top of the hill, not at the bottom of the hill like everybody else does. Right across the street, just about right across from a cemetery. Well, you're gonna have to show me. All right, I live right there. You can tell by looking at it, see? And I'm a little concerned about this because, as everybody knows, 75% of the wells that are located in the town of Granby are dug. And this is because that's where you get water. You drill wells, you don't get water. Or if you do, you get very little. These aquifers are very, I want to say, they're uneasy. You never know. Well, I'm up on top of the hill, and from what I understand what Mr. Ferguson's going to do, shave off the top of that, you got dug, 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 dug. What happens if we all lose our water? Because you cut the aquifer that's going to those 4 wells. And I'm only using those 4 as an example. On the other side.
I think most of ours are dug.
So, you know, I'm a little concerned because Ms. Stack there says common sense prevails. Well, common sense tells me that if an average dug well is 15 to 20 feet deep, if you go farther than 20 feet, something's got to give. You're going to lose something. You can't turn a pail over and keep the water in it. Does the DEC
how deep
even
is
look
your
at this?
well, Lon?
Pardon?
How deep is your well?
It's about 16 to 18 feet. But does the DEC, do they ever look at this part of the aspect? Or are there rules concerning that? Because I haven't heard anything about that. No DEC rep came around to my house to ask me what kind of condition I had for my well or my drainage. So, you know, these rules that the DEC has about whether they can mine or whatever, I gotta believe that it goes further than that, and we're just not hearing all the rules. Now, I don't have the rules. I probably could get them if I took a concerted effort to do so. And then the other part is, I live right at the top of the hill. And I'll tell you what, I have all I can do to get out of my driveway sometime without somebody coming up over that hill and smacking me broadside. and I can get out of that driveway a whole lot faster than one of these trucks can get out of their driveway. So if they're not gonna exit in the middle of the hill, which was they originally told me they were going to, that they're gonna exit on the other side of the other side of the cemetery, which is right directly across from my house, how long is it gonna be before somebody
The
hits the side of
application
one of those
states,
trucks?
the application states the other side.
Mr. Snyder stated the last meeting.
That's
that it was-
halfway up the hill.
That it was the east side.
Right.
The cemetery.
Check your notes, check your
Take a
meeting.
minute.
We can't have everything, we can't have both sides, like we got 20 feet, no feet, yes feet, no feet,
It's,
They'll take care of it.
on, off, on, off.
I got it.
the bad part about all this is it's unfortunate that Mr. Ferguson is gonna be the person who got, this all comes down on top of, because this should have been taken care of years ago. This town right here has always been in a hurt trying to get people to come in here to build homes because of high taxes. Well, finally, our taxes are getting down to the point where they're not all that bad anymore compared to the rest of them. But you keep digging these holes all over the place. Nobody wants to come in here and live where there's holes all over. How are you gonna draw any people in when you keep doing stuff like that? It isn't gonna work. You can't have both sides. You don't get a dime out of it. You get a lousy tax off of a blank piece of land, which amounts to probably less than $300 or $400 a year. And you don't get 1 cent out of every truckload of dirt that comes out of these things. Venetia's making a small fortune off in that pit up there. How much is the town of Granby making off Venetia? $1,000 a year. Woo-wee. Boy, that'll pay for a chunk of road, won't it?
Right here's what it is.
And Pritchard, he doesn't, none of these guys live in the town of Granby. They don't pay taxes here. Not enough to say so. They wouldn't live here because they wouldn't live in one of these pits back in their backyard. But they're more than willing to dig one here. That doesn't bother them. Now, I realize this has nothing to do with whether the permit is legal or illegal or acceptable or whatever. But somebody, you know, sooner or later, the zoning boards, whatever, have got to change the rules. It has to start somewhere. It's got to change. You can't keep doing this stuff. It's no different than the town of Oswego and the town of Minetto saying you can no longer put a mobile home on your property unless it's for a 5-year temporary period of time, just long enough to build a house. Now, what about all the people that wanted to? They can't do it anymore because the zoning board says you can't. Well, the zoning board can say you can't do that too, just as easy.
The procedure, Lon, is that the town board writes the zoning law, the zoning board enforces
Right.
the zoning law.
That's what we're saying.
The point I'm trying to make is, Mr. Ferguson is unfortunately, like I said, he's at the head of the list right now because he's putting a pit in, and everybody's just finding, so wait a minute, it's too much. It's not his fault. His timing was bad. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
But you just can't keep doing it. It's just tearing down town of Granby to the point where they're going to keep losing more and more people. I got to get out of my house this year. I have to sell it. All right? Because I lost my job. So I'm out of here. But the point of it is, who's going to buy it? Oh, sure, come buy my house. I got nice land. Oh, don't pay any attention to that hole across the road. It'll go away sooner or later.
25 years.
Okay. Rob? West side of cemetery, east side of cemetery?
West.
West.
If I said
It has
east,
not changed.
it hasn't changed. If I said east,
You said you were
You did,
moving
it's in
it.
the minutes.
It's in the minutes. You said you were moving it to the east side
For the
because
planning board's
the
request.
planning board requested it because of the fact that there was a conflict on pulling out in the middle of a hill.
you know, we
Well,
We
let me
always-
just interject something. If it's been changed from the west side to the east side, then it isn't in here as being a change, and it didn't go to the county as being a change. If it was verbally suggested at the last meeting,
Right.
then
By him?
By him.
Okay.
We haven't taken that into consideration. As far as we're concerned, it's west side as originally applied for, because that's what went to the Oswego County Planning
Well, he told us
Office.
that, that's why we said it.
Okay, okay.
I
Well,
got the minutes right
we got
here.
the minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
say it. You did.
Run that page.
But somebody else fresh, if I can, please, and then I'll get back to you. Sir?
My name is Don Woodard, RD5, County Route 8.
I
And
got it.
my property borders Mr. Ferguson's, right here.
Okay.
They're gonna be digging right out back my place right here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all this is his land right here. I sit out in my backyard for my enjoyment during the summer. And I don't wanna have to listen to trucks, payloaders that smell diesel fuel. So I'm opposed to this mining.
Okay.
All right, I also have a dug well, and it's 16 feet. All right, all this land kind of tapers downward for me. So they start digging more and more of this out. I don't know if it's gonna hurt the water table or not. And don't forget, I'm right here. Well, the prevailing winds come out of the northwest, right here.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is gonna be any dust, any fumes or anything, I'm the guy that's gonna eat them.
Gotcha. Ma'am.
Yes, my name is Sandy White, and I live at RD1 Box 250, County Route 85. I have a couple questions I'd like to ask Mr. Ferguson. You've been to your son's home, I presume, in Minetto, correct? And he's kind of secluded, and he's got nice trees in his yard. Does he have deer in his yard? You know,
I don't know. What does that have to do?
No, I just want to explain something. Does he have deer in the yard? Is there any deer in the yard?
I don't have any deer in my yard.
No, I'm talking about your son's home.
Wait a second. Excuse me. Miss White.
No, I just
Ms.
want to
White.
say that he might have a nice, beautiful, secluded area. It's nice. He does not have diesel fumes in his yard. He does not have the dust. He doesn't have any of this. He's taking this away from us. His father's going to have it at his house. But, I mean, I'm just trying to say that this is being taken away from us.
Okay.
Okay.
Lynn?
I'm Lynn Lyons, I live at RD1 Box 251, a couple places down from where the Ferguson mining operation is going to be. I have a couple questions. In Mr. Ferguson's application, he said that dust could be hazardous to horses, 2D1. What led to this conclusion, and why weren't humans included in the comment?
We thought it was
Please
fine.
don't laugh.
We thought it was
I'm
fine
not
too.
laughing at that. The reason I think that the horses were raised in the application is they were specifically raised through public comment, that there was a concern for the horses. One of the...
Comment where?
Pardon me?
Public comment where? It was in his initial permit.
Let me ask, please.
Yeah, Dennis, please.
The initial permit application is generally goes through some kind of a scoping process initially. What people in the board may not be aware of is that Mr. Moody, who's owned the property in the past, has conducted a mining operation on that property since the 1970s, and he has had horses on the property, and those horses have not been impacted. The other thing is, I guess we're happy to respond to direct questions and so on, and any questions certainly that the board has. I just reiterate what I stated at the beginning of this, that the environmental impacts of the operation have been reviewed and addressed, such as the dust, the noise, the traffic, those, and impacts on the water wells. Those have been reviewed in the DEC process under the State Environmental Quality
I was
Review
asking
Act.
a question, and I guess the whole thing is that these are my concerns, so I think I have a right to ask the questions, even though you're probably satisfied. I'm still not, and I'm just asking simple questions. I would like simple answers if I could get them, please. And I
I'm
just
trying
asked,
to respond to your...
well, you were giving a dissertation to them, and I really asked the question. I'd like the answer. And the question was, why weren't humans in this comment? Why were just the horses?
Well, I think that any review of dust and impacts of an operation necessarily entail the review of what impact they will have on humans. That's a necessary factor in any seeker review that undergoes. Bringing in the fact that, yeah, there are people in this area, but as well horses or other farm
But why the
animals.
importance on the horses?
I don't think it was meant to alleviate any concern or
Okay. All right, I have another.
shift the focus from the
Okay,
people.
Wait, just,
I mean,
I'm not finished yet, Henry.
if I might just add, the review that has been done has shown that the dust, any fugitive dust which would be generated by our operation will not cross the property lines. The 71-acre parcel and the 30 acres that will be affected land under the mining operation, the dust will not, it will settle out or be trapped within the property lines.
Now that, you're saying it will, so if that happens, what happens? What can we do about it? I mean, I don't see how you can make that statement that it's not going to leave the property lines.
Well, it has actually, maybe this will alleviate some of your concerns, it's actually been made a permit condition. And I can read that condition to you in the DEC permit that no fugitive dust will leave the property.
How can anybody control that?
It is through the process of the conditions, the mining operation, how the mining operation has been planned to occur over the site. It has been, as I said in the beginning of this meeting, I've been involved in environmental reviews with mining operations and permitting mining operations for the last 7 to 8 years. The DEC has been involved in it for the last 20 years. They've come up with the regulations and the methods and the manners to take care of the environmental concerns with mining operations. Dust being one that in every meeting I've ever been in, every permit application, we go through the same concerns. Dust is always a concern.
I think you've answered my question. I don't think we need to go any further on that.
Well, I think it's important that we go through and see that...
Because I've got a lot of questions I want to ask too.
Certainly, that's
Okay.
fine.
The minutes from the 12/16/93 ZBA minutes state that no resale, wholesale, selling of materials would be sold on site. There was never any mention of selling a product resale or wholesale at a storage site on 104, which he said, if it was busy at the time, they were going to take that stuff out and bring it out there. I believe this to be a two-sided statement. Are you going to sell, you're not going to sell it out of the pit, correct?
We will not be selling out of the pit.
Will it be stockpiled, taken out of the pit, stockpiled out at 104? And
It's
then
really
resale,
not,
wholesale?
it's really not a concern before this board. When we're talking about a special use permit
Okay,
application
thank you,
for
you
this
answered it.
particular
No,
piece
I don't
of
want any more. Okay, I feel that having a mining operation in this area will lower our property values. Here's an example. One quarter lot on our tax rolls is 10 acres. It has road frontage on both sides, 794. Oops, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
It has road frontage on both sides, 794 feet by 520 feet. It is assessed at $1,000, whereas 1 mile...
Excuse me, Lynn, while we speak.
go ahead. Corner lot.
When did he interrupt? Should I start over?
No, I heard corner lot.
On our tax rolls is 10 acres. It has road frontage on both roads, 794 feet by 520 feet. It is assessed at $1,000. Whereas 1/2 mile away, 1.1 acre lot, width is 350 by 150, road frontage is assessed, or it has that by road frontage, is assessed at $3,300. First lot mentioned is the northern pit. This shows that the northern pit has a 30 times less value than a normal lot. Don't you feel that the devaluation of our property in the area should be looked at before considering giving this operation a permit, since that one's only assessed for $1,000, the other one, that's 10 acres. We've got one almost similar that's 1.5 acres and it's 30 times more. So it's showing me that a pit will devalue the property. I would like
Okay.
you to take that into consideration.
Okay.
Now, lastly, I have a letter here I'd like to read, and I believe you all have read it, but I would like to put it in the minutes, so I would like to read it. This is to Wally Ozer. It says, Dear Wally, I'm writing to ask when the Zoning Board of Appeals will be considering our maps. As I have made known to you in previous contacts, we are willing to meet legitimate and reasonable concerns of citizens who live in the area because the Fergusons wish to be good neighbors. However, you know our position on the special use permit as opposed to special permit. It is in the town's position that the local law of 194 as an application to Ferguson Beach Limited's request for the special permit for their mining activities in an agricultural zone? If so, I think we can short-circuit everything right here and proceed directly to Supreme Court, for this would be an ex post facto law. Your own local law 194 itself speaks to the provisions for mining being preempted by the environmental conservation law. The local legislators may enact more stringent laws, local laws pertaining to reclamation. How can anybody put any more requirements, provisions, or topsoil on the Ferguson application? Isn't it perfect? Isn't it above and beyond anything that you can write into regulation? You know our time frame for needing the gravel business operations. The DEC is issuing a permit. When we get it, we believe that we have complied with all laws legally enacted with which we must comply. We will continue as a courtesy to work with the town of Granby, attending the zoning board, planning board, and whatever else you wish to answer questions and receive the town's input. However, we do not recognize the legality of the procedure being utilized and believe that the special permit pursuant to your zoning law, Article 5B, should be immediately issued as the proper maps and other detail have been filed. As an aside, but an aggravating one, it has come to my attention of my client, that apparently the town of Granby has selected only them to meet these requirements. I have information that leads me to believe the signature requirement by licensed land surveyor or licensed engineer were waived by the very board redoing the map to wit zoning and planning. It has also come to our attention that the maps filed by previous mining operations don't even come close to meeting the regulations of your zoning ordinance, and in one case may not even exist. I also have information that the previous excavating operations were not forced to go through this procedure. Is that because the town of Granby understood then what they don't want to understand now, that there is a special use permit and a special permit? It seems to me that the Fergusons are being made to pay for what might be described as the sins of others. This is a small operation. It is a legal use under the law by which it is controlled, the environmental conservation law. I do not wish to have to take the step of Article 78 of Granby, but it is beginning to appear that the requirements upon requirements will never end for the Fergusons. Please advise us to when the ZBA meeting is so that we may attend. We hope to get this scheduled soon. Quite literally, I have told my clients that once the DEC issues the permit, it would be in the town which would be acting illegally and trying to stop this application, and not Mr. Ferguson in turning on the switch. Should the requirements continue beyond the point where the gravel is needed for my client's business operations, we have no intentions of not running the operation because the town of Granby hasn't issued a special use permit. Very truly yours, Paul Pelkey. Well, it's my opinion that this operation has no regard for the law whatsoever, if they don't even want to consider Granby zoning laws. I find it hard for anybody to issue a permit to someone that will make a statement like that doesn't really care. And that one I really would like you to take into consideration.
Okay. Yes, sir in the blue shirt.
My name's Dave Money, box 414RD5, that's County Route 8, just south of the area here in concern. I have two issues. One, talking about the valuation of the property and the diesel fumes and so on. I understand that recently one individual living in the town of Granby on the corner of 48, on Route 48, they complained about the diesel fumes and all the trucks continually passing their home, and they got their assessment dropped by $10,000. I wonder what would happen here if all the individuals surrounding this area are affected by the trucks and the dust, if they also applied to the town of Granby to get their assessments lowered, what that would do to the tax base in the area. I think that would have a considerable effect on the taxes for everybody else.
I have the information here too. We need to see it.
That's right. And seeing as how the precedent's already been set with one individual for being affected by the trucks from the town of Fulton, it will be extremely difficult to turn other individuals down.
Okay.
Also, I noticed a discrepancy between the application that has been given to the town and information again on the DEC application. The DEC application indicates there's only going to be 3 phases, and the town of Granby one says there's going to be 4 phases. And the 4th phase is the one that is giving some concern, or at least the last meeting was giving some concern over the water in that northeast quadrant, where they dug the well and found that there was water higher than where they expected it. I wonder why there was only 3 indicated on the DEC application and 4 in this case.
Ms. Stack,
Yes.
could I have an answer on that one? On the 4th phase versus 3 phases versus 4 phases? Is it a quick one, easy for you to?
Yeah, it's quick and easy. The same application materials that are before you are the ones before DEC. There will be 4 phases.
Okay.
The same application materials were submitted to the town as were submitted to DEC.
Okay.
Yes, 7A says 3 phases.
Yes,
Okay. Young lady right there.
I just want to say, my name is Julie Engel, and I live right across the road from Mr. Ferguson. My main concern is our well. We have a 12-foot dug well. We have all the water we could ask for, and my brother-in-law that lives next to us has no water. My sister-in-law lives down right next to my brother-in-law. They have no water at all, and we are very concerned with our water, and we'd like to know who is going to replace our wells when they go dry.
Okay.
I think we need
Especially
an answer to that
since
one,
I
too.
have never, ever ran out of water.
I think we need an answer to that one, Henry.
And I would like an answer on who's going to do us up a new well there when our water goes dry.
Jimmy.
Huh?
Jimmy.
I'm sorry, I guess. It's not funny. Is the town of Granby gonna replace all our wells when they go dry?
I don't think so.
Can you tell me who is?
To be honest with you, I don't know whose responsibility that is, if anybody's.
Well, it's gotta be somebody's. If we've never ever had a problem, and then you go and put in a gravel pit, and I don't have any water.
Well, I think that's what courts are made for.
Okay.
I'll catch you if...
That's fine, sure.
If there isn't somebody else first. Ma'am?
Me?
Yes.
I'm Leona Farrad, I live on the Bingham Road. I feel that there are too many mines in this location already. When will the cumulative impact that another mining operation might cause to the health, welfare, and safety of the area, which is pointed out in the Granby zoning laws, but also is just common sense, be taken into consideration? I hope that you, as a board, will put this into perspective before making a determination.
Okay. Say again. Sir, with the hat on.
Chris Fox, live right across from Mr. Moody's. You know, you can talk for blue in the face, but you put yourselves in our shoes. How would you enjoy looking in the gravel pit all the time?
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Yes. What's your...
Hi, Mary Ann Ingerson, RD5, Box 425, Oswego. My concern is also the water. I know our well is 10 foot deep, it's a dug well. When we went to put a basement under our home several years ago, we had to stop at 7 feet. We cannot even have a full pipe basement because we hit water. And when they say 20 feet, they're gonna hit water. I know you're gonna. Where will that water go? What will you do with that water? I'm concerned about the groundwater contaminating the aquifer under many homes in the area. Will it contaminate the aquifer?
Do you want me to respond to that?
Sure.
Well, if,
No, it will not contaminate the aquifer. One of the things, again, this is an environmental issue, which DEC has looked at. One of the things that DEC has done in its 20-year history of, or almost 20-year history of regulating mining operation is looked at this issue in detail. They have what a report entitled the Upstate Groundwater Report, which looked at mining over 1,000 permitted mines, below the water table, above the water table, hard rock quarries with blasting, sand and gravel operations, and found no known instance of impact on quality or quantity of the groundwater. In this particular case, we're not mining below the groundwater. There's not going to be an impact upon the groundwater. DEC has looked at the mining operation, how much material we're going to take out, and the issues of whether there is going to be an impact. Certainly, if DEC and their water resources people and their hydrogeologists had looked at our plan and thought there was going to be an impact to wells in the area, we would have been required, or even if there had been some potential for impact to wells in the area, we would have been required to prepare an environmental impact statement on that issue and examine that issue. I've gone through it personally a number of times with the Department of Environmental Conservation, looking to see whether there will be an impact. In this case, we're not mining below the water table. One of the other things that you have to look at, well, some of the houses do have dug wells at certain feet, etc. What we're doing is we're taking down hills to the level of the valley on the property. The level of the valley of the topographic level of what is currently existing and is not below the water table, which indicates that, which is the proof and the data that you look at to see whether or not you're going to be crossing into the water table. It's a condition of our mining permit with DEC that we not go below the water table. And as a very conservative measure, we have also in that phase 4 area where there is the ridge next to houses of some of the people who have spoken, we'll do additional studies before we go into phase 4 to determine more information on where the groundwater is to ensure that we will not be going below the water table. And even if we were, I've been involved in enough mining operations, you're not going to have an impact upon quality and quantity of the water table merely because you're mining within the water table, which we are not going to do as a condition of our permit.
Okay.
So you're saying your 20 feet will start from the top of a hill down. That's where the 20 feet comes, more than 20 feet comes into play? Where does this 20 foot at the top of the highest hill?
Basically, again, that number relates primarily to the DEC's evaluation as to whether this particular project falls into a major or a minor.
Right, I understand
what
that.
we're going to do is, it's a bowl-shaped feature. It's got a series of 4-way dip features on it. We're going to plane in those phases 1 through 3. We're going to plane those 4-way dip features off just down to the level of the valley. We're not going below the level of the valley, essentially where the processing area is. And there's no water in that processing area. As a last phase, what we're going to do, that phase 4, is we're going to evaluate that ridge area to make sure that we're not going to have an impact on any water wells before we mine it. Now, there's certainly a possibility that we may never mine that phase 4 up along the ridge.
So when you say phase 4, is that you?
Well, that's Ferguson Beach Limited.
Ferguson
This is Rob
Now,
Snyder. He's the consultant and expert who prepared the mining plan.
Now,
So are you a geologist?
Yes, what I'm saying is that ridge area along there on the right-hand side of that map, we're going to have to get in there and evaluate that area before we mine. Mr. Ferguson has a water well, a dug well in there too, which has shallow depth of water.
we have no desire to get in there, and Mr. Ferguson has expressed to me, has no desire to get in there and mine that regardless of the impact on water. So we're gonna evaluate that area before anything is done in that area.
So if you find the water table to be low enough, you will continue to excavate.
What we're saying is, we will not be mining below the water table. If we were to mine below the water table, we need to go back through the application process with DEC, and they need to look, so we will not be mining below the water table.
Do you know the height of the water table in that area?
and watch this process?
If we wanna...
I mean, has that study been done?
Yes, we've,
And what is the height?
throughout the process, we've looked at it, DEC's looked at it, and the mining operation as proposed is not going to impact the water table, and we're not going to be mining in the water table.
So the DEC was here in Granby, on their
Yes.
property,
Yes, they were.
and they determined the height of the water table to be...
It's not necessary to determine the exact height of the water table. What the pertinent question is the mining operation going to impact the water table? And it is
If you don't know
not.
the height of the water table, how can you come to a conclusion as to the effect?
Because we are not going to be mining below the water table.
So they don't-
Generally, in operations where you're going to be getting close to the water table, which we are not going to be getting close to,
You know what the water table is?
they
No, wait.
use a
Don't
5-foot
interrupt, please.
buffer area. And we're,
I didn't hear the
Use the 5-foot
buffer area above the water table.
But what I'm saying is, if you don't know where the water table is, how do you know that you haven't gone further than 5 foot? What if you're down to 3 foot? If you don't know where the water table is? I don't understand.
We know that the water table is below the valley floor, and they've dug test holes in the valley floor down to 15 feet and not hit water.
That's what I was wondering.
Okay, Lon?
Zach, you're a lawyer.
Yes, I am.
I'm kind of curious as to why you would make a blatant statement like you just did when you said, it will not affect the water table. I'm telling you, are you willing to put that on a piice of paper, put your signature on there, that you guaranteed us that that will not affect our well? Because that's basically what you just said.
In my opinion.
No,
yes.
that's not what I'm asking your opinion.
Well,
You just said that it will
Lon,
not affect our water. Now, that's an awful blatant statement. If you're willing to put it on a piece of paper, put your signature on it, so that when and if I lose my well after 11 years of never having a problem with it, that I can go directly to you and say, you owe me $1,600 because I had to put in a new well. Because that, to me, that's just exactly what you just said.
Lon, I think that the point remains that if anything happens to your well, you can sue through the court.
Well, I guess the other point I say, you keep referring to the DEC. I can't even tell you how many times I've read the DEC has so much area to cover and so few people to cover that area, they can't even possibly do the amount of work that they should be doing according to their structure. So I can't even, I find it really hard to believe that they've even gone to the extensive study that you say they have done on that property,
Okay.
without even contacting anybody in the surrounding area to find out what the depths of those of their wells and everything else that goes with it.
Well,
Well,
Okay.
they never came to my house, and I don't think they've ever been to anybody else's.
Dennis?
Yes. Back to the map here again. This seems to be our biggest stumbling block on here. I know we talked about the 200 feet each way and everything else, but I checked with the DEC today. I asked them what an OW17 is, which I believe that's a Class 2 wetland. And I have a question about the mine area. We have this 40 feet off property line. I have a tree stand here that has water running by it. This whole area in here is wetlands. I cannot believe that we have to dispute over this 200-foot mark when there's probably wetlands on this other property that isn't even thought of on this whole permit. I think this is just null and void and careless studies.
There's a wetland in the center of it,
and I don't,
according
No,
to the map.
but you have to be 100 foot away. This is a Class 2 wetland, Henry. This isn't just a little stream. And I believe if it's wetland here, it's got to be wetland on this property. And I am not over 100 feet at the max, and there's water running by here in the fall. You can't tell me that they had a study. In the wetland should be, it says, you better read the law on the wetlands because you have to be 100 foot away from the wetlands. There's nothing on there that shows, and that's why this 200 foot is in our law that is supposed to be put
I understand
out.
what you're saying, Dennis, but a wetland is not a wet area of land by legal definition.
Okay. Why?
You can have a stream running through an area and it's not a wetland.
Sure.
But it is classified.
This is classified as an OW17. Rice Creek is an OW17 wetland.
The whole area of Rice
Yes.
Creek?
Well, certain, if I could,
Certainly.
I talked to DC also, there are certain boundaries that they are supposed to come out and
They're
establish.
supposed to establish it.
They're supposed to, yeah.
We haven't talked about
Mark
that
them
yet.
out.
They-
We haven't
they-
gotten that far yet.
The permit, I believe, shows the area of wetland.
Yeah, but was it the DEC, like she said it was? Or was it Mr. Snyder's opinion this is wetlands? I guess that's my question.
That's your question, okay.
The surveyor who said that was the wetlands, this rotundo down here, missed a couple of hills, so maybe he missed a
Wetland.
wetland or two, you know, I don't know.
And a wooded area that
Maybe, I
isn't
don't
there.
Okay. Mr. Snyder, can you address that as far as the wetland goes on the map within the property?
Yes, that is a jurisdictional wetland within the confines of that property. Within the confines of the Ferguson property, that is a jurisdictional wetland.
By the DEC?
What is really
Is
being
that marked
looked
by
at
the
is
DEC?
Yeah, well, they cannot mark
has
it.
to meet
No, we
certain
flagged it.
information.
They have to do
We
that.
flagged it.
Wait a second, one at a time, please. And Go
The
ahead, Ms.
issue
Snyder.
of the wetland is, if it's a DEC map wetland, that DEC has determined it meets their jurisdictional requirements, then there's a 100-foot buffer area that applies. Based on the wetlands map, which is the DEC wetlands map, included in the application materials, the wetland that we have noted on the application materials that we're staying 100 feet away from is the only one of concern on this application,
according to DEC.
according to DEC, correct?
Okay. All right. Does that answer your question, Dennis?
Oh, obviously not, but
Right.
Just back to the, my name's Fred White again, back to the water issue in your second application. Your second application, sir. Talks about mining sequence, and in this section, it goes back to wells on that you were gonna check out the wells. It says, we're gonna mine here first with, start moving off 6 to 8 inches of topsoil, be stripped, etc. The site will be mined beginning with a high phase located in phase 1 and progress from the south. To skip over it, the southwest corner of the pit will be mined next. Concurrent with mining in phases 1 through 3, the geologic conditions will be evaluated along the east flank of the pit. Once it's been determined that mining is or will not adversely impact dug wells.
Once it has
I'm sorry. Concurrently with mining in phases 1 through 3, the geologic conditions will be evaluated along the east flank of the pit. Once it's been determined that mining in this area will not adversely impact the dug wells, how are you going to do that? How are you going to determine that it's not going to...
Mr. White?
Yes.
If you could direct your questions to Rob Snyder and myself. Rick Ferguson, who made the application, is not here tonight. He's home ill with the flu and could not make it,
Correct.
unfortunately. But Mr. Snyder is the expert here.
Well, you heard me. You can answer the question if you'd like to. Whoever. I thought it was...
I don't, what was the question? I mean, you read the...
question about phase
Lawyer? Okay. The geologic conditions will be evaluated along the east flank of the pit. How are you going to do that to determine if it's going to affect the wells?
We're going to do it in accordance with DEC. We're going to be sitting down with DEC and coming up with a plan that needs their approval, that will provide the information necessary to make that determination. It'll be based on hydrogeologic principles, and
Good.
and as I said, will be reviewed with DEC.
What type of principles?
Well, I'm not a hydrogeologist. Mr. Snyder certainly has some
Well,
expertise in hydrogeology.
the reason I asked this is because I
being a
also
geologist.
talked with, tell me this guy from the
Joe
DEC.
Moskowitz and Kevin.
Joe Moskowitz and Kevin Bliss on a 3-way party line. And I had written them a letter during the public opinion period and expressed some concerns over wells, along with about 8 or 9 other issues that you probably have a copy of. And they led me to believe in so many words that a seeker is a big generic, covers everything in the world, and mining has the least impact on any kind of environmental impact, and they really don't care, and those aren't the right words, but they're not very concerned with the impact that the dust is going to have and that the mining is going to have on wells, and they didn't go into that because in the application it has these type of things. They said they're going to do something about it. So they take that at face value and assume, since it says it in there, that that's going to occur, that you're going to do something responsible. And I'm just curious what it's going to be, because you're going to do it, so I'm sure you have a plan now of what you're going to do, and that's why I asked it. Other similar questions I'd like to ask maybe a little bit later on. You said that the application was approved, and I believe you since you said so, and you said that there was conditions attached to it, and one of them was that you were going to curtail the dust. I'd like to know how you're going to do that as well. In fact, could you answer that one now?
Sure. The dust control measures that are involved in any mining operation, as are going to be involved in this one, the haulage ways are going to be watered to prevent any dust from performing there. Trucks are going to be loaded in such a way that the dust will not
Tell me how you water
this.
Wait, don't interrupt, please. Let her have it.
The trucks are going to be either covered or loaded in such a way that the dust will not leave. Generally in mining operations, as in this one, the topography, the berming, the vegetation which is left in the perimeter of the mining site traps the dust within and contains it within the property lines. In this particular plan, it was developed in such a way so that the fugitive dust to be generated by an operation would not leave the property lines. One has to remember it's a very limited operation, as we set forth in our mining plans and as has been conditioned in the DEC permit, that the open area of the mining site will only be that which is necessary for the mining operation. We're doing it in a series of phases. 4.5 acres each phase with concurrent reclamation, which provides that only a certain area that's necessary for the operation is open, while the area that's been mined down to the final limits is being reclaimed, and that the reclamation of phase 1, for instance, will begin once we go into phase 2. Those types of restrictions on the operation, you're restricting the amount of dust which can be generated. It should also be remembered, which is a known fact, which most laymen don't know, is that the sand and gravel material which is extracted from the earth has a natural moisture content of, 46%, Rob? Which is seen as sufficient to keep the material from becoming fugitive airborne dust.
Mm-hmm.
So those types of things, along with all the other measures that are in the permit and in the mining plan, control the fugitive dust, and it's the same types of methods and same types of measures that have been used on every single mining site in the state and has worked on the mining sites in the state.
So you mentioned you were going to water the roads. How are you going to do that, with hoses, or is there a special truck full of water? These are the kind of things.
To be honest with you, I don't know how
Well,
Mr. Ferguson
I'm
will be
saying
using,
it's unsatisfactory to be able to say, well, we're going to do whatever it takes, because doing whatever it takes isn't enough. If someone said, your appendix is coming out, but we'll get it out, don't worry. I'm sure you would say, tell me where you're going to cut, tell me what you're going to put inside me to put me to sleep. Will I feel pain? And if you expect them to say, nah, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. I expect some answers. And everybody does.
The answers that I've given are time-tested, proven
How are you going to
methods
put water?
which
Answer
control
that simple one, please. How are you going to put water in? With what?
either with a hose or with a water
A
truck.
hose
Where are you
from
gonna
what?
You gonna
To a
dig
truck,
wells?
hooked up to a truck, it's gonna be the front of it or the back of it?
Generally, in mining operations, they have a water truck which has a tank on it, which sprays water over the road.
Is that how this operation, who you're
But-
representing, is gonna
Fred,
control dust?
Fred, I don't think we can get into every little detail of.
No, I'm not, I
that
just wanna
sort
get
of
into
stuff.
one to see if one can be answered, and I don't think, the point I'm making is that, the point I'm making is that there's gonna be a lot of these conditions, and I don't think I think they're spelled out vaguely, but not one of them has any substance to it, like how are we really gonna do it? Because what happens when dust leaves this extraneous, or whatever you call it, dust, leaves the property? Does that mean mining stops? It should, if that's one of the conditions, but will it? It hasn't yet, anywhere.
If fugitive dust, which, I mean, it's been shown through every mining application in the state of how to control dust, and it's effective. DEC has found it to be effective. That's how they regulate it. That's what they require in mining permits. That's what's required in their regulations. They are the experts that regulate mining and control an impact of dust, which has been controlled in every mining operation in the state. The response to your question, if dust goes across the property lines, if fugitive dust goes across the property line, we're in violation of our permit, and DEC can come out there and violate us, shut us down until we comply. That's a simple answer to.
Okay.
That's all.
Mary Ann?
With all due respect, the DEC is supposed to monitor gravel beds. We all know they don't. There are many in Granby that do not even have up-to-date permits. Nobody has the time. They are not policed. Everybody, no, this one's supposed to do it. Nope, they're supposed to do it. You get the runaround. So don't expect us to trust this mining operation when we see numerous other ones in our town that just do as they please. They don't abide by the rules. So what is to make us think this mining operation will set a new standard for excellence?
Okay, Mary Ann, let me interject something. I didn't actually. One of our board members who isn't present here tonight, Fred Martin, checked a long time ago when this first came up. He's in Florida on vacation and won't be back until March. But when there seemed to be a lot of discussion about a lot of phone calls being made about violations of current mining operations going on and things of this sort, and trucks speeding, dust, and everything else, the first thing that I wondered was, why hasn't anybody done anything about this? And one of the answers is, according to the DEC enforcement officer and according to the Fulton Trooper Barracks, they have not received one call of complaint. Has anybody here, did anybody here make one call to the Trooper Barracks?
Yes, we have. I personally have made several calls.
To the Trooper Barracks in
Yes,
Fulton?
and the result of just one alone was that the DOT did come out with the scales in the Sheriff's Department, and they did a roundup. That day it was impossible. There were dozens of trucks. They were going 65, 70 miles an hour down the road. They were overloaded. Rocks were coming out of the truck. They were smashing our windshields, denting our cars. It was
Wait a second.
Yes, I did
This sounds
call
like a
them.
nuclear war that you're describing.
Well, I wish you could live in that neighborhood. It is beyond words. It is
We do have
unbelievable.
police
We
reports
have called
for
the Sheriff's
broken
Department. Do you
windows.
know what happens when we call the Sheriff's Department? Sheriff's Department, when they get in the neighborhood, they get on that scanner and they announce that they're coming. We hear it. You hear all the activity in these mines. Quiet right down. They stop. They come to the neighborhood, all's well. As soon as they leave, well, we didn't see anything. You hear them all start up again. It's one big game. There's no enforcement,
All right,
there's nothing.
has anybody called the DEC enforcement officer?
Yes. Again, no results. I called one day when the roads were so hazardous there was no school. It was heavy slush, it was in November. Northern, who has an entrance on the Ridge Road Hill there, it's a very dangerous spot, it's blind. They were coming out of there with 18-wheelers as fast as they could go that day, and I asked that some consideration be made for the neighborhood. Cars were all over in the ditch and everything else, and these people up there mining with 18-wheelers, overloaded, gravel all over the road. They don't care. There's no enforcement.
Okay.
This is the reason why you see the support that you have here.
Okay.
There's just no enforcement at the town level, at the DEC level. Nobody cares. And here we are in an already saturated neighborhood considering another one.
Okay. Understand. Mrs. Farragut.
We have another problem besides just the dust. Oil spill. I have a tributary to Rice Creek that goes right on the side of my lawn. And one summer, there was an oil spill in the gravel mine up behind me. I didn't hear it, but I am by that creek every day because I watch the fish. It has trout in it. It did have trout in it. But then all of a sudden, the creek got black and swirling with this black sand. It wasn't black sand, it was oil spill. And when I found out what it was, I contacted them and said, cut it out. Well, It took a long time to get it out of there. But the stones all kept the black from the oil. And I think they should look at something from the oil spills too. Because they are there, I know, I live beside one.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No.
Yeah. One of the reasons, I guess.
Is it okay to see the permit now? The approved permit?
Yes, I think it would be all right to see the...
You have it?
Like I said, that's my only copy, so.
Understand.
Be happy to
You will go
provide
home with it tonight.
Okay.
May we make a copy of this?
Certainly.
Okay. Thanks.
I'd like to request that I be furnished with a copy of that too.
Sure.
I'm compelled to make at least one opening comment, and that is I am astonished at the contempt for which this applicant and council hold this board and our regulations at. They tell us right in the letter that was read a few minutes ago, this board can go to hell. When we get that DEC permit, we are in business. And that's exactly what they're saying. That bothers me a great deal. I worked for 42 years, and this field is specialty. If I know one thing, I know how to read regulations, and I respect them. There's no reason for all the problems we've had in this application here. If the applicant had taken the time to prepare the application correctly, look at page 1 of the application. Page 1 of the application asks for a special permit pursuant to the provisions of 6F, I believe it is, of the zoning law. 6F has nothing to do with this, with excavations. They can't even get that right. Before I get into the detail, which I intend to, I want to call George Ryan as a witness, and I'd like to have him sworn by the chairman, please.
Okay. I don't have a Bible, Mr. Ryan. We promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Well,
Okay. Would you give your name and address, please?
yes, George C. Ryan Jr., Syracuse, New York.
And your credentials, please?
Yes, licensed land surveyor, environmentalist.
Can you speak up, please?
Yes, ma'am. Licensed land surveyor and environmental analyst, Ryan Survey in Syracuse.
You have a degree in as an environmental analyst?
No, there isn't such one right now. All set?
Mm-hmm.
George, would you explain what you do in the routine course of practicing your profession?
Yes, my firm is basically structured primarily land surveying, planning and development, environmental services, and geographic information system, which is computer databases. Right now, the environmental issues, we put mining work, which we've been working on since the law changed in the early to mid-70s. We've been doing mining plans, and we've been on literally both sides of the fence, both pro and con. We run them through and work them through the environmental issues because a lot of the mines we're involved with go far beyond the environmental assessment forms. They get directly into impact statements. And we are correlating some of the information with geographic information systems, which relates to the mining and the mineral sources here in this county.
Okay.
How many years have you been engaged in this work?
33 years.
Does your work ever involve the preparation of subdivision plans?
Yes.
Site plans?
Yes.
Have you ever been engaged as a consultant by planning boards or town boards to guide them in the land development and planning?
Yes, on the environmental issues.
How many people are employed by your firm?
15 presently.
Where are your offices located?
Right now, the main one's in Syracuse, and we have 3 under phone, if you will, as a recessionary measure right now, Watertown, a couple other counties.
Do you have any offices outside of this country?
We have a teaching office in Moscow, Russia, presently.
Could you list other credentials or positions of recognition which you have held during the past few years?
Well, I'm on the board of 2 colleges, Private Institute, Paul Spitz College, 2 years, and the 4-year school, Elford State. And I work in Washington with the Institute of Land Information, mostly for overseas work, overseas involvement.
Are you a member of any association of land surveyors?
I'm past president of the New York State Association.
Have you studied the entire application submitted by the applicant here, so you're familiar with all the terms of it?
After tonight, I really doubt it. I reviewed one. Now I wonder which one I have reviewed, to be quite honest about it. I believe it is, in fact, the latest one. It was not dated, the copy that I managed to receive.
Have you read the minutes of the December 16th hearing, so you're familiar basically with what transpired prior to this hearing?
In general, yes.
After you, having read this application and having read the hearing minutes, would you explain the concerns which you have discovered to the board?
The major concern that has come up tonight that kind of bothers me is that I too checked with DEC yesterday, and I believe I had one of the superiors. I known Moskowitz for many years. I talked to, I believe, either a Philip or a Mr. Phillips, and in quite a hurry he was going to Albany. I was under the impression yesterday in the afternoon, no, about noon, because he was leaving at 12, that this application was not approved by DEC. In fact, if my memory serves me right, they were waiting for something to come from the town to confirm the application. And I had gathered from that statement that what they had done, they were waiting for the town review. He did inform me very emphatically they would take lead agency status, which is quite standard on mines. So I prepared some answers to some of the technical questions on the environmental issues primarily. Some of them are some pretty basic ones I feel that are built into the town zoning regulations. The environmental ones I would trust tonight could go beyond. They primarily do not involve just the site. They involve problems off-site that are caused on-site. And I can go through those if you want.
If you will, please.
But, excuse me, but aren't the environmental issues, isn't that what the DEC hearing is about?
Well, I'd like to respond to that. Your zoning law provides under special use permits. The Board of Appeals shall have the power after public notice and hearing to grant special use permits, but only after the board has found that the standards set forth in paragraph 3 below have been satisfied. Paragraph 3 says, whenever the Board of Appeals grants a special use permit, appropriate conditions and safeguards and/or time limitations must be attached thereto to protect the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public, and for the preservation of general character of the neighborhood in which such use is to be placed, and to minimize possible detrimental effects of the use on adjacent property. Now, these provisions have nothing to do with the operation of that mine inside of the borders of the mine. DEC governs that. But this board and this town most certainly have the power to deal with everything that goes on outside of those borders. And we certainly have the power to deal with those impacts that are created from the inside of that mine on the outside. It says right here, to minimize possible detrimental effects of the use on adjacent property. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to the...
I got to add paper.
Right. Good enough.
Fred, while he's changing paper.
Be right back.
That was the guy.
the burden of proof in any case that comes before you is on the applicant. I read the application. I read all the DEC material. I have listened to the testimony of December 16th, and I've obviously listened to what was here tonight. This applicant hasn't given this board 1 cent, 1 word of how they are going to minimize the detrimental effects of this use. All they have done, in fact, is hand to you the DEC mining application and nothing else. Council has far more faith in DEC than I do. The very idea that the representation can be made that there will be no impact on the wells, in my opinion, is preposterous. DEC is so understaffed, they can't even enforce their own regulations. I can't imagine they gave any thoroughgoing study to this. First of all, the mining industry has such a strong lobby, they got this legislation through that no other industry has in this state that gives mining industry benefits far above any other land use in the country. DEC is not going to be searching for minor reasons why they should disapprove one of these applications. It's clear sailing for an applicant coming before DEC, virtually. I'm at a loss to understand why DEC issued that permit contrary to what they've been telling these people during the last several weeks, and particularly contrary to the volumes of material having been sent to DEC complaining of the conditions here. So, in response to your question, I didn't mean to go the long way around here, but what we're talking about is the impact that this operation is producing outside of the mine. And that's what we're concerned with. That's what your zoning law is concerned with. That's what I asked Mr. Ryan to address.
Okay.
We would object to his testimony and his submission on that basis because it does direct itself to environmental issues. I think he tends to go through some points with respect to air pollution, noise pollution, in relation to the environmental assessment form, which was submitted to DEC and reviewed by DEC. To any extent that they're coming forward at this late date on environmental issues is totally uncalled for. It's not before the board. They reopened the public comment period before DEC specifically for purposes of having comment on the environmental issues. They're well past the deadline now of bringing up environmental issues. Certainly, well, Mr. Eggleston may have 33 years experience as an attorney, doesn't have any expertise in the environmental field or in the mining field, and while he may think that it's preposterous that a mining operation is not going to have a detrimental impact to adjoining properties, the experts and DEC agree that it will not, particularly in this application that's before the board. And as far as Mr. Eggleston's, if I could just indulge me for a minute, his statement that we've taken this board in the town and the jurisdiction that the board has for special permits and special use permits in contempt. Quite to the contrary. We believe, and we've put on the record and preserved our rights and reserved our rights, that indeed we think that the zoning provisions are preempted. Mine land reclamation law provides that it preempts all other state and local laws, with the exception of the ability of towns as set forth therein for special use permit provision, which I'll respond to in more detail. I don't want to interrupt their presentation for too long, but I do want to object to any divulging into environmental issues. It's simply inappropriate at this time. We agreed, and I think it was agreed and set by the board last time when the meeting was adjourned for purposes of having Mr. Ryan here, that he be limited to talking about the zoning ordinance issues and not environmental concerns.
Well, I believe the agreement was that it would be, all talk would be of specifically the Ferguson pit. And
whether we call it environmental issues or whatever, we are talking about possible effect on wells. We are talking about the effect of dust on these people, on these neighbors. We're talking about the effect of noise. We're talking about the effect of oil. Whether you call it environmental or what, these are effects that will possibly emanate from this use or operation. If you were dealing with a gasoline station, you'd be concerned with the same thing, oil spillage, gasoline. The same thing we're talking about here tonight. There's nothing in the DEC regulations that preempts this board from considering the criteria I just read to you. And I have the case law to back that up. If this town had a provision in its zoning law that precluded mining in a given district, there would be no mining, because that rule would prevail, no matter what DEC said. Where the zoning law permits mining subject to a special permit, the burden is on the applicant to prove his entitlement to it. If he doesn't prove his entitlement to it under every standard or criteria, he is not entitled to a special permit. And I've got case law to support that. There's no question about that. This applicant hasn't produced one word for this board to address these criteria in Section E, special use permits. Any suggestion the contrary is just pure bluffing. I'd like to have Mr. Ryan continue with what he started to say a moment ago.
I can walk you through the 4 or 5 pages of comments. The first, on page 1, there's quite a bit of confusion in the town zoning on certification. I won't labor that issue, but it is confusing from a surveyor standpoint, an environmentalist standpoint, and I'm sure from the other side standpoint. The only thing I asked in there is that, of course, the credentials, Mr. Snyder, they're on file, they're well aware of his work in the DEC. My only question was that the line and the flagging be certified by a land surveyor. It was just a suggestion. I know the ways around the boundary work and so on, how that is handled, even in light of your certification in this particular town. The question under subsection F6, I have, you're very blatant on saying in the town that the 3-year permit and the application has been made for 5. I just throw that out as an observation. The mine land use application, that was the major one. Apparently it was the last one. Most of these comments are leading to monitoring. I'm sure you'll pick up on that. One of the big problems going down the 2D1, which is on air pollution, which is dust, and the residents and the horses come up again, and that was in the original application, and the fugitive dust on the wetlands. Again, and it's also related to the operation, the day-to-day operation, if it is in fact day-to-day, and of course vehicle traffic, which is a dust producer, if you will. And my suggestion on that would be a monitoring system. Noise pollution, I did check with the manufacturer and the Model RD40 screen that was going to be used there. There apparently has been some calculations made as to decibel rating. The ambient level in that area is about 50. And I know, talking to the neighbors and people that we've been working with, they would like to keep it obviously at ambient level. The screen generates almost twice that, but only a few feet away. The placement of that is in the, they've got it down as a stockpile area and a processing area. The suggestion would be, and perhaps this kind of thing could be worked out as a special use permit condition, because it is a movable screen, that could be left in an area where the decibel rating would be ambient, and it could be worked out amongst the neighbors and the mining operation. On the reclamation method, this was a very similar comment that the Soil Conservation Service had about something more into the text on what it is done. I think there's going to be some concern on the steep slope on the east side that comes to fruition. We would like to see that done, and something more on how that will be addressed. Again, that could be a condition of the special use permit. One of the serious issues that did bother me, and this is, I'm quite familiar with the opponents there outside, if you will, the report they refer to in the 1,000 mines of the 1,300 in New York State and so on that have been analyzed. We are concerned, we know the mitigation of particles and how that can move in and about. What does bother us though, when there's open pond, we feel that the conditions, because we do a fair amount of environmental audits, and this is what we're suggesting here, because we understand repeatedly that there's trash pits on the property, that the open pond is very vulnerable to pollution. It isn't so much in and above the hydraulics that the other side speak of. That's an issue. I'm more concerned with oil getting in that and getting into the groundwater very quickly with an open pond. It resembles the Green Lakes just south of Syracuse, which is nothing but a mountain with the top skimmed off by the glacier 10,000 years ago. It's a very serious item there. You turn your water on, the water goes down, you flush your toilet, the water goes back up, you got a problem. And this is what we're concerned with this pond, is the very susceptible to pollution, and we would strongly recommend an environmental phase 1 audit or assessment to be done. On the full environmental assessment form, these are just a series of questions, and I think some of them appear to be a little bit light, but they're taken quite seriously by the neighbors. One of them were the deer trails that were found on the property. The only thing I can see to do on this is, again, a condition. It's going to take the two sides getting together, which may head to a scoping meeting before these conditions could be drawn for the permit, which would be work out maybe an accelerated reclamation plan in that area. I just pose that as a thought that you can read. It would keep some of the neighbors very happy if they knew within a year rather than a 5-year open pit under the DEC bonding regulations that they could at least get this thing closed up and be back hunting and so on in that area. The source on question 11, I'm just curious as to the source of that information. It wasn't specified. That's not a major issue. There was the question as to endangered or threatened species and so on. The reason I asked, we had the misfortune of finding a spotted turtle, and we lost a little over 1 million yards of gravel in Manoa, New York, just right near Syracuse 2 years ago. On question 18, that could be checked. That was the fact that they're in an ag district. I think that's been spotted also by Soil Conservation Service. That should be verified and corrected on part of the permit. Project description from the long environmental assessment form. We'd like to see the floodplain on there for a couple reasons. Just mostly put the public on notice that it is in fact there. The floodplain, there is 2 separate laws, I realize, but there is sometimes a correlation environmentally. Question 20, will the project produce operating noise? It came out, yes, and what we're leading to is a monitoring situation. That could be tied in with the dust monitoring for the monitoring of noise. I'll have a final recommendation on that. The question 23, total anticipated water usage, I'm a little bit set back by the answers. I can understand them. They had 0 listed on the report. The water will be used on the site, obviously, for watering, which is quite a standard method of keeping dust suppressed. Chemicals are just about gone now. There's very few, if any, that are allowed under DEC right now for dust suppression. Usually, on most mining, they take the water out of the pond, quite honestly, they'll pump it right into the truck. It might be their own on-site well, it might be protected. Those are generally okay, but there would have to be watering on the days that on their mining operation presumably would take place. And one last little note on the zoning and planning information. There was a question, let's see, the action consistent with the recommended use plan. That was left uncertain on the long form, and that would depend if the town, in fact, has a land use plan that would allow that in light of the heavy mining in the area. The mining plan itself, again, I relate to the fact that the processing area, if that could be moved, and I don't see why that couldn't. SCS picked up on it as a low area. It's not that low. It could actually house to take care of the screening operation, and the screen could be moved within that and still maintain the ambient noise level, which is more of a concern to the neighbors. And also that would be screened if you check the depth of those contours that are shown, and I realize they're probably USGS contours, but the implication is there that if they move that screen within that, the height of the screen mostly will be covered, but they got to keep it in that certain grade. And I had just made a suggestion on a graphic enhancement as to the contouring. It would be a little easier to follow the map. Your regulation is a bit unique on requesting two kinds of contours on a reclamation plan. That's a little bit confusing. On the reclamation plan itself with the pond, again, I'm very concerned and would recommend, and this is from the senior hydrologist that I used in 1988 on a major mine with Southern Tier from O'Brien and Gear. And that you come up with a on-site petroleum site to be located and either shown or a little attachment made to the special use permit so that anybody on the site would know where the petroleum is, and the whole thing is to keep it away from that open pond or the general location of the open pond, where it will be. And finally, the major issue is the mine floor elevation. That gets confusing. In this particular mine, the way it's been designed, there could be several mine floor elevations because it's going to slope. As you see on that grading plan, it slopes to the pond, and then it's supposed to be a grass waterway out to the wetland. There should be a few spots so the public would at least know what they're talking in elevation. In summary, what I'm saying is that I had intended tonight, prior to finding out that the state permit had been issued, that the environmental assessment phase 1 and the monitoring plan for the petroleum products and so on, and a safety plan, these kind of things could be worked into a site-specific DEIS. And I would encourage that my intention was to go this route where we could sit down and scope these items out rather quickly. It's not a big deal. Sit down and work these out so the other side knows, and put these right into a draft environmental impact statement. We could wrap it up very quickly with a final in 30 days, probably, if both sides agree, and get these things in there. And the major issue would be monitoring. Excuse me. Would be monitoring. And our intent would be a minor monitoring plan sufficient to the neighbors, and would be the cost be borne by the applicant and done by a third party. That's all I have.
Okey doke. Questions? Yeah.
I'm handing to the board a memorandum of law and demand a copy with attachments and the blue original, and without the attachments on the other copies here. Sets out on page 2 the provisions in your zoning law regarding excavations and mining. I will not read those at the moment. I will, however, point out that the quotation from paragraph E1, the Board of Appeals can issue a special permit, but only after the board has found that the standards set forth in paragraph 3 have been satisfied. I will formally ask this board, before any decision is made, to make findings of fact, which is intended to be required by any board that is acting on an administrative matter. Make findings of fact wherein you set out the facts that this applicant has proven to satisfy the standards set forth in paragraph 3 that deal with the protection of health, moral safety, and general welfare, and preservation of general character of the neighborhood in order to minimize detrimental effects. There's been nothing produced, nothing I've heard, nothing I've read. It's their burden to prove this, not ours. These good people have come forward with a multitude of serious issues. I expect these people located in this township and in this area, which I viewed the other day, because it provided a quiet countryside atmosphere. They see that in great peril. They know that their houses are not going to be worth the money that they paid for them if they have to sell. Their peace and quiet is going to be destroyed substantially by this operation. I talked at the December 16th meeting briefly about my personal experience at gravel beds. A gravel bed is located little less than a mile from me, Saunders gravel bed. I know what that has done to my property. It may well be that sand and gravel is moist when it comes out of the ground. But when it spills off the trucks, driving down my street, Valley Drive, it dries out, and that dust blows on my lawn so the grass is brown, not green. I certainly can speak of my personal experience as to the effect of gravel beds. I know what I'm talking about.
I understand, and I meant to ask you before, I believe you made the statement that you'd lived next door to this gravel bed for the last 52 years.
That's correct. And I asked the board to reread those provisions, or that conversation. I know the effects. I take issue with the suggestion that because that gravel is wet, when it comes out of the ground, it's going to stay wet, there'll be no dust. That is preposterous.
We understand that gravel beds produce dust in many instances.
In the Tandem Holding Corporation case versus the Zoning Board of Appeals of the town of Hempstead, cited on page 3 of the memorandum, the court said, entitlement to a special exception, same thing as a special use permit, is not a matter of right. The stated standards in the ordinance guiding the board's consideration of a special exception application condition the availability of the special exception, and compliance with those standards must be shown before any exception can be secured. That's precisely the case we have before us. That's why these people are here tonight protesting any grant of any special permit. The fact that the applicant has filed a mined land application with DEC has nothing to do with this board or satisfaction of these standards. The question squarely before this board is whether the applicant has offered substantial evidence showing he's satisfied these standards. That's precisely it. Our position is he hasn't. I'm asking the board to make specific findings if they feel to the contrary. I have another deep concern as regards this applicant, and I recited part of it before, and that is, in your minutes and before this board, Mr. Pelkey represented he would furnish me with maps at the December 16th hearing. I never received them. I protested by letter to him. I protested by letter to the town clerk. At the last meeting, his colleague stood before this board and said he would send the maps and the application to me the next day. I haven't received anything yet. I suggest to the board that that is representative of what you can expect as to the enforcement or abiding by any conditions that may be imposed by anybody on this applicant. If he can't abide by his own agreements made before this board in a room of 75 people, then why should he pay any attention to any other conditions imposed by anybody? These residents, these property owners, have availed themselves of virtually every avenue imaginable, trying to get someone to listen to their plight. I can't imagine how they could have done more. Someone said tonight, would you like to live next to a gravel bed? Well, I don't think anyone would. And if this board follows its rules, follows its own ordinance, it has no alternative but to deny this application because the applicant has not proven his case. Question was raised concerning the my characterization of the contempt this applicant has shown for this board. I'm talking from council's own letter. I didn't dream this up. Council says, the last line, We have no intention of not running this operation because the town of Granby hasn't issued a special permit, which by law isn't constrained to issue. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I understand, that's in the record now.
Regardless of what DEC has done, it's this board that has the final handle on this. The fact that DEC has issued a permit means nothing, has no binding effect whatsoever on your decision. Your zoning law stands, it survives. It is not in conflict with the DEC regulations. It provides that in any special use application, those several criteria must be satisfied. There's no exception carved out for mining. It's the same whether it's a gas station, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's a 7-Eleven, whether it's a video store, whatever. They all have to meet those same standards. There's no exception for this use. All of those uses that I just enumerated, they all have impacts, whether we call them environmental or what. They have impacts. They have effects. They will affect the quality of life, the quality of living of people nearby. That's what we're concerned with here. We have no concern what happens inside those borders. We have no jurisdiction over it. But we sure have concern over what happens outside of those borders, which this board is the sole board that has the power to deal with that and to address it and to say no to this application because of failure of proof. Thank you very much.
Understand. Wally?
Henry, is our comment period over here?
Beg your pardon?
Is our comment period over?
No, but hold for a minute. As a matter of fact, how about a 3-minute, whatever you call it, so you can grab a drink and hit the men's room, ladies' room, persons' rooms.
Yes.
Can I just put my name in the minutes? Like,
Clarification, yes, go ahead, Lynn.
I'm in line again. And Henry said that he had talked with either the DEC or the state troopers about any complaints, and indeed there was a complaint. Mr. Lund was at my house, wherever Steve is, the day I called the sheriff's department. The sheriff came out and Steve was there. I called them both because I have 2 holes in cars in my windshield, and I did get the license plate number of the truck, and I do have that, so I will show you that there's been.
And that was with sheriff?
Pardon, sheriffs have been called on numerous occasions.
All right. Just when Fred Martin, who is a board member, called DEC enforcement officer in the trooper barracks, there was no record. They looked through the records. There was no record.
I've talked to Joe Moskowitz on many occasions about violations too. So, and we've called the town board. I've called Steve Lund as early as 7:15 in the morning to get him down there too. So there's been many complaints.
Okay. Mr. Ryan, appreciate your, I'd like to ask you a question or two if I could, please. Appreciate both your presentation and the knowledge that you bring to this project. My question is, it seems from what you've handed, I finally had a chance to kind of read through it here, that your concerns are more on monitoring and enforcement and concerns of those sorts, not so much concerns as to whether the application has met the criteria of being able to have a mine there or whatever. Is that a true?
Yes, mine is primarily that, correct.
Okay. Does that mean that since you haven't addressed whether you feel that it's met the criteria or not, that you feel that it has?
No, I'm not going to comment on that. Not after reading through the zoning in this town, I wouldn't comment on that.
Okay. And you've had ample time to look through the zoning and everything else?
Zoning is very confusing, to say the least. Either it's got to be lessened or strengthened, one or the other, so that people know where they stand. I think that's a big part of the issue tonight.
Understand. Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Rose Anthony.
Rose Anthony, I have a question for Mr. Ferguson. He came to see me, and I don't know how to say this, but he wanted to know if I understood what he was applying for. He told me that he's only going to operate 3 acres and 2 trucks. That's all he's got, and that's all he's going to operate. And it's only for septic tanks and wells, right, Mr.
That's
Ferguson?
right.
Well, why go all, you could take, you could mine how many loads and loads and loads of gravel for septic tanks and all. Why go all through this? I know people here in Granby that have 1 or 2 trucks that don't, you don't have to get a mine. You don't have to go all through this. If you're only going to take that little bit, what he's saying, with 2 trucks, this is all a waste of time, money, and all this is a waste. If this is what this gentleman is only going to do for septic tanks and
We have a 10-wheeler and a 6-wheeler.
if that's all, how much are you allowed, Henry, to take out without a permit? How much are you allowed to take off your property without a permit?
1,000 tons.
1,000 tons a year, I think
For
it
the
is.
little bit operation, he said, telling me that, he said, I don't understand why he's going all through this if it's going to be that small, that what he told me. But it's not that small. It's going to be a big thing.
Excuse me, Henry,
Yes.
Bill Ingerson, RD5, Box 24, Bingham Road. Now, Mrs. Anthony's bringing up a good question here. Now, say this man does have 2 trucks. Okay, we got 6, 7 other gravel beds around the corner. What if all these people told us the same thing? And they're bringing in 20, 25, 30 trucks. Now, this man may be honest, just like the Joe Blow next door. But 3 years down the road, somebody confronts this man and says, hey, let me add some gravel, I'll bring in 5 more trucks. Okay, what do we got? We got another Pritchard, Sampulia, Northern.
Okay.
I have another question. This man says, yes, that's right. He came to see me, that's right. How could you have 6 trucks an hour when he said he's only going to operate with 2 trucks?
They're fast.
That's not very honest. You know, it's all, something's wrong.
Would you like to address that? I believe what you're doing is you're going for maximums. That there wouldn't be any more than X number per hour working. Am I correct on that? That's not saying that you're going to be working that number of trucks all the time.
If I understand your question correctly, yes.
You're setting a
that's true.
maximum parameter.
Well, not a maximum parameter. What we're saying is that we have 2 trucks. That's what, the intent of the operation, and maybe it's, I don't know if all the public comment has come out, because we had intended on giving a detailed description of what the operation was and what the material was going to be used for, and I think a lot of those types of questions of that sort will be answered in that fashion in our presentation.
Okay,
So I may-
then let's get to that. Okay? I ask that you to give us any information that you have, additional information in support of your application.
Okay.
You have the floor.
They already have.
They did it.
It was up to public.
Mr. Snyder did it the whole, we've got the minutes, Henry, he did it the whole first time.
Yeah, this
He
is only
explained the
public
whole
comment.
thing for an hour.
But
Well, I think this.
I think that under the circumstances, we can go through more details.
Put the map up.
Sure.
While we're putting the map up, I'm going to ask Mr. Snyder to outline on the record for the board his credentials. Robbie, you want to?
We already heard,
We
he
already
did that
heard that.
before. We
All
already
right,
heard all about it.
excuse me.
I have a bachelor's in geology, a master's in geology. My thesis involved a geologic mapping project in the Canadian Shield. In addition to the geologic mapping, the field mapping, I did a major in trace element geochemistry on the rocks themselves. Subsequent to graduate school, I spent 8 years in the oil and gas industry, exploring for oil and gas both on and offshore in the Gulf Coast area. My primary duties involved evaluating where potential oil and gas prospects might occur and evaluating subsurface flow, obviously, of hydrocarbons and connate water and C-O-N-A-T-E. And I also monitored gas wells and oil wells. I sat the well, evaluating the logging procedure of the well, and subsequent to that, I began working in the environmental industry, primarily in mapping and wetlands. That is our primary function, is doing mining activities and wetland delineations and evaluations, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been preparing mining applications and reviewing the impacts of those applications since 1985?
Yes.
And your education is in geology?
Bachelor's and a master's.
Is he under oath?
No?
He certainly can be.
Yeah, I can put him under if you'd like.
I don't know if he was. I didn't know he was under oath.
You swear to all the statements you just make?
So, yeah.
Just question.
Okay.
Rob, if you want to come up, let's go through some of the, just to answer some of the questions that have been raised tonight as far as the details of the mining plan itself. Certainly, we can go through that so the board fully understands what we intend to do. The operation is a small one. It is limited. It's limited to an open area of 4.5 acres at any one time. That's what the phases are designed for, phases of 4.5 acres. That's the type of operation that is intended here. The other thing that I think the board would be interested in is the Fergusons being a local firm. They are using the material. The purpose of obtaining a permit for this site and overtaking the operation of the current mining operation from Mr. Moody is to assist in their business, which is to construct septic systems and driveways. And here are some photographs of the work that they do for the board to see. Now, what they're going to be doing is taking out the material, which is I believe, an item number 2 stone, which is what the county requires in septic systems, and using it in their family business. It's not a commercially run operation like many of the others that are brought up here tonight as being a major operation. It's going to be used only in their family-run business for use of material in constructing the septic systems, doing driveways and some basement foundations. So that's why we have represented it to DEC and to this board that the material on the site is not going to be sold for public use from the site. It's going to be removed from here. Trucks, Mr. Ferguson only owns 2 trucks, was a 6-wheel tandem and a 10-wheel tandem, which are relatively smaller trucks for use of this sort. It's not a commercial mining operation. It's strictly to use the material in their business, so they don't have to purchase it elsewhere. The material's got to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from this pit. It's been tested. It is quality material. It will meet the Department of Health specifications. Without this pit, without this opportunity for Ferguson's to continue the operation of this pit, they will be laying off workers if they cannot find their own source of material. What else? Oh, the other aspect of it that the board may be interested in is in the mining application material, we have depicted the location of the site. The trucks will be coming out onto a county route and turning right out of the site. 99% of them will be going that way, and then to the north to Scriba and Oswego, where most of the work from the business is conducted. As part of the mining permit application and as part of the review that DEC conducted and the information that Mr. Snyder put together, several on-site surveys were conducted, data was collected, and information was presented to DEC. The information that was gathered goes into responding to the questions on the environmental assessment form as to what is on the site and as far as the impacts that would be associated with it. So when Mr. Egelstein makes his broad-based statement that there's no evidence before this board to show that we conform with the standards, there certainly is. We have an expert here with years of experience, with a degree in geology, who has gathered the data and submitted it to DEC. It's been reviewed by the DEC experts and shown that there's not going to be a significant negative impact. That includes, if you look at the definition of environment under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, we're talking about the community, the character of the community. We're talking about air and noise, and we're talking about all sorts of impacts that seeker covers. It's a very broad-based statute. And they go through that information and they look at the mining operation. They use their expertise. The wetlands people, the fish and wildlife people, the air resources people, the mine land reclamation specialists, as well as the environmental analysts in DEC, all get a copy of the application and they look at it and they review it. And their collective experiences go into determining, number one, under seeker, how this application should be dealt with, and whether there should be a determination of that there are no significant negative impacts on the environment, and whether or not and if there is. The town and this board were given notice of that review, and they were involved agencies, which essentially under law means you're bound by that determination because you're part of that review. But be that as it may, I think the point tonight is that there certainly is an overwhelming amount of information before this board as to the review that you are conducting, geared to whether there's going to be a detrimental impact on adjoining properties. That's exactly what DEC has looked at. That's exactly what Mr. Snyder has looked at with his experience in the wetlands area, his experience as a geologist, as a hydrogeologist, with experience and background in those areas, as well as the different divisions of the Department of Environmental Conservation. So we do have that information already presented to the board. One of the other things that we have to keep in mind with respect to this review of the application is we're permitted use. Yes, the zoning ordinance says by special use permit or special permit, whichever way the board is going to interpret that. We've already gone through the reservation of rights, but That is a legislative determination by the town fathers, the town board, that this use is in accordance with the zoning and is compatible with this area. It is a permitted use in an agricultural district. And therefore, there's a basis there already that this use is compatible with the surrounding uses. And there's case law. There's matter of Lee Realty. There's a number of other cases that we can cite for you that go through and describe that determination's already been made. There also is other cases, which I'll get to later in my presentation, regarding what the citizens have raised. The other aspect that we have to be reminded of is this application cannot be determined on whether other operators or mine operators have violated the permit conditions or violated the law. You've got to assume as a matter of law that this permit operator is going to comply with the law and comply with the permit conditions. It's not a review of whether DEC has enough manpower to regulate the operators. The other aspect of it is that in 1991, when the law was changed, the Mineland Reclamation Law, which has been in effect since 1975, in 1991, the legislature of the state amended that. I was intricately involved in those amendments and know the intent that was behind the senators who proposed it, the DEC people who proposed it. One of the things that they were very concerned about was the lack of funding to regulate mining operators. So what they did in the provisions of that law was to substantially increase the amount of fees that mine operators paid. So there would be money to put towards enforcement programs. For instance, the fees used to be you paid $100 every 3 years, you got your permit for 3 years. Now it's based on how much acreage you're going to affect every year, and there's an annual fee, and that money is for enforcement purposes.
Do you know specifically the fee that's involved here on an annual basis? Just off the top of your head.
I would estimate, and this is off the top of my head, like you asked, probably $700 to $1,000, depending upon the amount of acreage. You also have to consider, and if you want a copy of it, I think I brought it with me, the bond that was required. There's a Mineland Reclamation bond. And through DEC's experience, they've determined the amount of money per acreage that they require that would be necessary to reclaim a land if we were to walk away from it.
Do you have that amount
Yes.
off the top of your head or readily available?
12,000? 5,000? $5,000. Well, the way the Mineland, I hear a couple comments from the audience regarding this, and I think this is one you need. The way the Mineland Reclamation Law program is set up and is administered by DEC, they require the bond for the amount of acres you're actually going to affect that year. As we indicated, we're going to be affecting 4.5. And that's what that bond amount is based on. It's not based on the 30-acre mining site. Certainly, once we affect more acreage, we're going to have to increase the bond depending on the amount of acreage we... The other aspect of it that I think is important for the board to know is that the mining site itself, the actual excavation area, is not 30 acres. What we have is a 30-acre life of mine. That term is mandated through DEC definitions of what is your affected acreage, what is your affected land. And that could be anything from where your access road goes through to where you put your processing plant, those types of issues, the setbacks, for instance, from the property lines of 25 feet plus a certain amount of the slope itself, where your berms are going to be. Those are considered affected land under the DEC regulations, which brings us up to the total of 30. But if you look at 4.5 acre actual excavation area for each phase, you obviously come up with just under 20. So the actual excavation area that we're going to be mining is going to be less. And that's mandated by the fact that where the reserves are located on the property is where we're going to be mining. We need a certain type of reserve for the business. And that's where we're gonna be mining and taking those reserves out, is where they're located. We're
Excuse me.
obviously not going to be mining in areas where the reserves wouldn't meet the quality specifications that are necessary.
Can I ask a quick question?
Excuse me one second. I expect that certain folks will be able to ask you a limited number of questions. Would you prefer that they be held to the end for your own continuity, or how would you like to handle it?
Yeah, I think I'd prefer they be held to the end. I
All
held my
right. Can you
presentation to the end.
note them then?
Well,
But shouldn't we, as the issue comes up, talk about it?
Wouldn't it be better?
Easier to explain it than
yeah,
to have to go back afterwards.
I just had a relevant question, I thought. Not blasting you, I'm just asking a quick question.
I don't have a problem. I've been answering questions all night. I'm getting
Okay.
a little sore
Well,
throat
I guess my question is, you say you're mining 4.5 acres. Nowhere have you said that you're gonna reapply for a permit for the next 5 after you have reclaimed the first 5.
Because
Is this just something that's a given law, or?
that's not the way the program is administered. What
Well,
we do,
well, wait, we only have a 5-year max on our, any mine in our area.
In our zoning.
it's,
So that means you have to reissue for a new permit
No.
in 5 years? This is more of a, I'm not blasting, I'm just asking. You have a 30 acres, and you say you're gonna mine 5 every 5 years. After that 5 years, you're gonna reclaim that other 5, and then you're gonna start on the new one.
that's,
Is it?
no, that's not the way it works. The 5-year permit terms are just that terms, they're
but you
renewable
can't renew 'em.
terms. Yes, they are renewable terms.
Not with our
But
town.
Our laws are more stringent, so they have.
Well, our position is those are preempted. And I have case law on that. I have a number of case law.
Okay.
You have matter of Patterson materials,
Okay.
matter of Rossi, matter of Guptill materials.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, there's any number of cases throughout the state.
So you're saying this is approved, you're gonna go
This-
on and never
that's
get
it,
another
and
one?
you're done.
Never get
No
another one.
renewal permit
We
in front
have
of
a,
this
we
board or
have a
anything.
permit now from DEC
From the
entitling
county
us to
manager.
mine the entire site.
If the town.
Oh, it does
lets you.
say the entire site?
It does say that? I thought it was 4.5 acres.
No,
It
it's
says right
30
here.
acres.
It is.
Yes. The 4.5 is the initial affected area, and that governs, like I said, the purpose of that is for the reclamation bond.
It says affected areas during the coming mine permit is 4.5.
Coming
This-
mine permit is the next 5 years. It's all tied into the reclamation bond. That's the purpose of having that.
So that supersedes our town zoning.
That's right.
No, it doesn't.
It
It does. It does or it doesn't?
According to them, it does.
I like this. This is good.
Yeah. Continue, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay. As I said, the only wetland area here is, we are maintaining the 100-foot. Mr. Snyder did indicate his expertise in delineating wetlands and in wetlands work, and DEC has reviewed that information and agreed to it, that it is accurate. They're wetlands people. They certainly know Mr. Snyder because he works with them almost on a daily basis with respect to applications that are pending before the Department of Environmental Conservation. The other thing that we have looked at and studied are the noise and dust issues. And as I said, these are environmental issues. The only reason I'm addressing them is they have been raised before this board. We do maintain that this has been addressed in environmental review. It's not an appropriate consideration tonight, but so that the board understands the mining plan. The way the operation is set up, it's in a valley, and it's inside the property boundaries. And we've done the necessary, collected the necessary data based on Mr. Snyder's experience and based on his study of the topography, the surrounding vegetation, and the mining operation itself, the way it will be conducted, and the conditions that we've agreed to through the DEC permit and proposed in the mining application, that fugitive dust will not be a problem, and by that we mean that it will not be leaving the property itself. The fugitive dust will be contained within the property and will not leave the property, will not cross the property lines. This is something that, based on experience in mining and based on the topography and the study of the particular site, that we're able, in Mr. Snyder's expert opinion, which DEC Air Resources people obviously agree with, or have agreed with, that fact has been shown and it's documented in the record. it is a virtue of something that works with every mining site that has come up before DEC with these types of issues, and particularly in this one, with the surrounding topography the way it is. Mr. Snyder's looked at the prevailing winds, he's looked at the topography, he's conducted the necessary studies, submitted the information to DEC, and there will not be any off-site impacts with respect to dust. With respect to traffic, we have looked at the traffic issues. Certainly, it's basically a two-truck operation. At times, when the Ferguson's business with the septic and so on gets busy, they do lease out another truck. That's happened once, I think they said, in the application material, once in the past 3 years. So we're not talking about a substantial amount of traffic. The trucks certainly meet the county regulations. They are required both by the permit and by state law to be covered, or the material contained within the trucks in such a way that dust will not blow out. That's basically, it has to be below 6 inches below the top of the truck in order for there not to be a tarp over the top. And that's what the standards that have been imposed statewide on mining operations, because they've been found to work. The trucks themselves will come out, and the majority of the trucks will be turning to the east. I notice a lot of individuals, particularly this gentleman in the front who has a daughter, I believe, who has asthma, was concerned about the truck traffic coming past his house. 99% of these trucks are going to be going to the east, not to the west, and then up onto is that County Route 8? County Route 8 north to Oswego and Fulton. The other aspect of it is the access itself. We have spoken with or contacted the County Highway Department, who has approved the means of access. We've not actually, I don't want to mislead the board, we don't have our highway work permit yet for that access, which I believe is existing anyways for the current operation that's going on there. So we do have their okay. We have requested, as the planning board asked us to, that the necessary truck warning signs be posted, and we believe that the County Highway Department, because it's in their control, not ours, will do that. They've indicated they would. The other aspect of the operation, which I think has been misinterpreted, is that there is not going to be any petroleum storage on the site. There will be refueling done on the site, but no petroleum storage. And DEC requires, as part of their review of any mining operation, and as in this case, that you take the necessary precautions. It means we're going to come in with a truck and fill up the front end loader that's hauling the material off the banks. That's all. There's no petroleum storage or potential for any contamination or oil spills or anything like that from this property, since we won't be storing it on the site. As part of the review that the Air Resources people in Division in DEC conducted, as well as the Mine Land Reclamation Specialist, they looked at the operation from the standpoint of whether the emissions which are going to be emitted from this operation are regulated by state or federal law. I'm sure everybody has heard somewhere in the past year about the Clean Air Act and state's implementation, and how they've really cracked down on regulating our emissions. They have looked and reviewed this operation, in particular the processing, the small portable screen that we're going to be putting on the site and using periodically, and they found that doesn't even meet the threshold requirements for a permit. So we're even below any threshold requirements of concern from either a state or federal level. The other issue which I wanted to touch upon was the issue of the noise. Our information, our data, and our review, we have information certainly about the noise levels of front-end loaders, the noise levels of the screen, the noise levels associated with trucks, and the noise levels associated with a mining operation in general. And our mining operation and our studies have indicated and DEC has reviewed them and agreed with them, that the decibel level at the property line, which is really the key component here, is your decibel level at the property line. We could have taken it out to the nearest sensitive receptor, which they call in noise studies, but we didn't. We drew back to where the property line was, and then the decibel level at that point is not going to be above ambient levels. It's not going to be above ambient levels, then there is no impact, because the sound is going to be the same as the ambient levels in the neighborhood.
Does that mean I won't hear it?
Certainly the ambient levels.
I'm serious.
Yeah, I understand. I think your answer's forthcoming.
I get back yard there.
Did, Ms. Stack, the question was asked, does that mean by Mr. Black that he's not going to hear it?
It doesn't mean you're not going to hear it. It means that you're not going to distinguish it as being any louder than the current sound. It's not going to be a distinguishable sound from the current level.
What is the current sound?
6 trucks driving by every hour.
It's what you currently hear. It's ambient is the ambient. We can't change
Okay,
that.
understand.
One of the questions that was raised earlier, just as a clarification, was why the horses were mentioned in the initial application. And Mr. Snyder has clarified that for me. One of the reasons the horses were mentioned is that Mr. Moody has horses on the site. Horses are generally known to be very sensitive to dust. And Mr. Moody's past use of mining on this property, which has been continuous from 1970 forward.
He's our relative, and we've never known him to mine. I wonder where you got that information. I'm sorry.
Please don't interrupt. I'll recognize questions, but please don't interrupt.
And so the impact upon the horses was seen as a possible consideration that DEC would be looking at in any environmental review, and that's why it was looked at in that fashion, and found that it would not impact them, particularly with respect to the past operations that have been ongoing at the site.
There's a question in
Sure.
that.
This is about the second time you brought up, or third time, that Moody, the previous owner, mined there before. Is there anything to base that on? Or
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Say?
I wanted to live here for 5 years, but this is my neighbor, and he's been, that's his
That's my cousin. I've never known
Based
it.
on conversations in the past 2 weeks, as well as some personal observation with
By
Mr.
you?
Moody. No, not by me, by Rick Ferguson, who I indicated before could not be here tonight because he's down with the flu. But he has conversed with Mr. Moody. There's evidence of prior mining on the site, certainly, that has been seen by Mr. Snyder, who's
He said he's
obviously
been mining since 74, that's my question, I'm just,
since 70.
or whatever, and
1970.
I don't know that that's a true statement.
That is what Mr. Moody has indicated to us, and certainly the aerial photographs could show some prior disturbance on the site. Unfortunately, we don't have the little magnifying glass that you can look at aerial photographs with to see the topography.
According to Mr. Moody, that pond at the south end of the site is man-made. There's a berm along that pond.
That's not gravel bed. That's not mine.
Apparently, he removed material out of that pond and created that pond, according to Mr. Moody.
Yeah, and in fact, that does happen in a lot of mining operations where you do take material off the site that wetlands created, and in fact, that's what happened in this case.
Yeah, a mine doesn't have to be big, and a gravel bed doesn't have to be big. It could be for own use.
That's
Correct.
correct, right.
Okay.
And certainly on this particular piece of property, you're not going to see, as you would in a commercial mining operation that has a uniform distribution of the resources on the site and the mineral resources. You're not going to see the same type of an operation. Here you've got the particular resources throughout the property, so you're not going to see one big hole, as some people have called it. Certainly in this operation, the way that the Fergusons have designed it, and purposely so, is that they're going to take down the upper topography and actually create a more level piece of property, which would be more conducive to agricultural use, which certainly is where what it is zoned for.
Rob, you've walked the site, and you've seen these areas?
Yes.
Of previous?
Yes.
Roughly how big are these areas?
The pond area, I would estimate, including the berms, it's hard to say because the site's largely overgrown now.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say how much area he has in fact affected. The top of the ridge is planed off in some areas, and the exposed ground is present there.
Can you show that on the map, please?
The pond is small. Up in this area, up in here.
Whereabouts?
Are we talking acres? Are we talking
I would say the pond is quite small.
10 square feet areas?
The pond is in this area. It's quite small, and it does show the berm on the side of the pond. There is in fact a berm on the corner of the pond down here. That pond I would estimate is probably, and it's probably less than an acre.
Okay.
Small.
Okay.
Well, it was indicated to us too that he did take material, he did not just use it for his own use.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reclamation.
I think that's probably coming. I'll see that you do. Mary Ann, quick question?
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
are you employed by the DEC?
No.
The lady said you had daily contact with the DEC?
Yes. I talked to him quite a bit.
Were you asked about your recommendations for the approval of these plans?
By the DEC?
Right.
Asked for my recommendation regarding the
As to
approval.
the approval of the site plan?
No.
Were you asked about your knowledge of the site plan?
I think the knowledge is presented in his application materials. Mainland Reclamation Law has a detailed list under Title VI, Part 420 to 422 of the DEC regulations of the information that Mr. Snyder has to put forward in the application materials, and that was done.
So I just wondered why the daily contact with the DEC?
He works with the mining permits and other permits
I'm
on a daily
not just
basis.
working on this project, I'm working on multiple projects, so I talk with them.
Okay. Again, I'm perplexed about the wetlands on this other property, the Richard Lyons property. If you surveyed this property, you didn't look over there?
I can't walk on other people's property without their permission, obviously. No, I can't.
It is not a DEC mapped wetland.
Well, you didn't purchase this property till June, and you got a date of... Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't purchase the property.
Okay, well, no, I know, but
Continue.
I know there was activity on it before.
Yeah. Quick question?
Yeah, just going back to what you
I
said.
need your
when
name
we-
once more.
Engel.
I need your name once more.
Julie Engel.
Before when Rose Anthony said something about them using they said they're gonna use 2 trucks. Now she's talking about leasing trucks. You're gonna have more
it-
trucks in there than you think you're gonna have.
Now, it states in the application 2 trucks owned and an occasional leased vehicle.
What's occasional? What's the
That-
Over the last 3 years, they leased 1 truck to aid on 1 project on 1 occasion.
Henry, why would Mr. Ferguson come to see me personally and tell me this, that he's only going to have 2 trucks and operate on 3 acres, and the only gravel he wants out of there is for his leach field and his wells?
Mm-hmm.
This is Mr. Ferguson right here that came to me.
I understand, Rose.
This is answering you. Why?
All right, Rose, suppose that it was gonna rain and we were fixing your septic system.
Yeah.
And we needed to get that gravel in, and we just couldn't get it unless we hired another truck for the day to put the gravel in your septic system.
You don't need all
And then that would be it.
You don't
Then
need
that
all
would
of
be
this.
it. We hired 1
No,
truck,
wait a
one time.
minute. Now it's getting into
Wait a minute,
free
no,
flowing.
I had the floor, he interrupted, right?
Well, yes, except you addressed
I
him a
have a little
question.
finesse, sometimes.
Sure.
Well,
If you ask a question
okay,
of somebody
Henry,
else, you lose the
smile on
floor.
your face. But the thing about it is this,
Again, he's saying one thing, and he's saying another thing, and she's saying another thing. They're all saying different things. And here's the man that's applying for the permit. I mean, for the application. Why would he come and tell me that?
I don't know, Rose. Whenever you file an application for anything, you cover all the bases. That would be my explanation of it. Let me ask Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson, why would you ask for all of this if you're only going to be getting a couple of truckloads? You're obviously getting more than a couple of truckloads. You need more than a couple of truckloads.
We rented one truck for one day. Like I told Rose, if we get into a bind, it's gonna rain or something like that, and we need it to do the job, I cannot see getting one truck for one day to finish the job. Simple as that. And then we go back to 2 trucks.
Okay.
That's all we own, is 2 trucks.
And
that's the information that's in the application,
No,
and
we
that's
have
correct,
6
and
on
it's certainly consistent with what Mr. Ferguson is saying again tonight. I hope we're not gonna be
Go ahead.
rehashing the same
Yeah, I
issues
understand.
again and
Yep.
again, we're gonna be here all night.
The other issue that's been raised by someone is the lowering of property values. Certainly, with this being a permitted use, this being a use which the town fathers have determined to be allowed in this district, it's not an appropriate determination. It's an appropriate determination at the zoning level or the town board level, but certainly not this level. Certainly, there has been no expert testimony here tonight to say that we're going to lower property values. I have a report from a real estate expert who conducted a study down in Westchester County on the New York